Hello and welcome to the 2021 Felix Hustings. Imperial College Union has a proud democratic tradition, regularly holding yearly elections with record national student turnouts. Hopefully this year will be no different. Candidates are running for roles as varied as the union president or JMC or working class students rep. Despite unusual circumstances, elections this year will be running as they always have. Candidates will be asking you for your vote to permit them to represent you, the student body, next year. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to showcase candidates running for every position in the union. Unfortunately, if we did do this, it would take weeks, if not longer. Therefore, we've chosen to focus exclusively on the roles that successful candidates for will be paid next year, either taking a year out of their studies or working part-time in the union. As these roles will be paid, we feel they deserve a higher level of scrutiny to allow you to make the very best decision about who to vote for. As of 9 AM today, voting is now open. We here at Felix hope that what you see over the next couple of hours help you feel more informed and in a better position to choose who to vote for. Voting's very easy and can be done online. Just go to vote.union.ic.ac.uk/elections.php or search up Leadership Elections Imperial College Union on any internet browser. We will begin the Felix 2021 hustings with candidates for the Graduate Student Union President. Hello and welcome to this unique Meet the Candidates hustings event. I will like to bring in our two GSU presidential candidates, Zhuxiao Wang and hello, how are you?
Hello, Callum. Nice
Good.
to meet you.
And Arvesh. Hello. So I will go over the rules now, and then we can get started. You will have 30 seconds of protected time to lay out your positions and your manifesto points. After that, I will then ask you questions and you are free to interrupt and discuss and debate with each other. So, Zhuxiao, do you want to go first? You have 30 seconds, starting now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zhuxiao. I'm a third-year PhD student at the Civil Engineering Department. I'm the JSU president in this year, and I'm seeking the re-election. This year, I have done a lot of things to improve the PhD supervision quality and to improve the MSc student experience. And I also try my best to reform the postgraduate representation network to guarantee the student can have a direct platform to talk with the university leadership. And I also tried my best to help during the university and the union during the COVID-19.
That's 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds.
Hello, this is Anvesh speaking.
Hello, Anvesh.
Yes, I'm Anvesh, and
30 seconds starting
hello, nice to meet you, everybody. And all right, so thanks for being here. And I'm glad to tell you that I have nominated myself for GSU president role. And the core issues which I would like to target, those are, hello?
We can hear you.
So those are basically little help towards tuition fee, and week-long job fair is what every student needs. So these are the points which are at the core of my manifesto.
Right.
And
that's
EU
30 seconds,
EU settlement job scheme is also something which I'm proposing at the moment for all the EU students.
Right. Let's get into asking you questions. So, Anvesh, you talked about in your manifesto and just now about providing returns of tuition fees, and you quote the number 35%. You say that international students will be able to request a 35% back of their tuition. How do you intend to as in your position as as the GSU president, how do you intend to convince the college to do that? Anvesh?
Well, Callum, thank you for asking me this question. It's a very crucial question, I think so. As we know that we have already gone through Brexit, and due to... Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Keep talking.
Hello?
Keep talking.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Keep talking.
Yeah. So basically, because of... so this is a very crucial period we are going through, and I think it's very important that we understand this point, because of the Brexit, EU students will be paying more money, thrice the price than the normal students.
But
so university is
how
going
are you
to have a lot of money at this
back
point.
for students?
However, at the same point, there will be good students. How that money I'm going to get?
Yeah.
So we have to sign the petition. We have to sign the petition. We have to make a petition. We have to go to college and demand this particular point, that we would like to get 35% tuition return fee, because 35% tuition return fee is something which we have to ask for first time. And you have to understand why it is important, because it will give the possibility to students, yes, EU students who really have
can I say something? Can I say something?
Anvesh, let Susha respond.
Anvesh, I have 3 years experience for campaigning for the... I have 3 years experience for campaigning for the international student tuition fee since 2018. I had experience in speaking with Alice Guest directly about the tuition fee. And I mean, yes, it's a very ambitious project to reduce 35% for the tuition fee. But as long as a person have any experience about the tuition fee, he or she will definitely know it is impossible to reduce 35%. I got that conversation with Alice Guest. She will definitely reject that. If you ask other officers in the union, like the RBJ or the previous GSU president, he will definitely tell you that it is impossible to get a 35% discount, because the university will never agree with that. So I would suggest, if you want to campaign for the tuition fee, you cannot expect them to return the money for you. But I would say, let's lobby the university to stop increase that. For example, the international student tuition fee increased £500 every year. So we can talk.
Okay. That's very interesting. Sushao, you in your manifesto, you make it clear how proud you are to be a Chinese national student, and you talk about strengthening the UK-China bond.
Yes.
Do you think this, these references to international student matters are relevant for a GSU president?
No, because from my experience, I was born and raised in China, and I live in this country for 10 years. And I studied in UK since 2014 at Imperial, and I studied in this country for 7 years. And I love China because this is the country where I born and I raised up. And I love UK and I love Imperial because this is the country.
Sure, but how is talking about China? How is talking about China going to help postgraduate students?
Yes, Colin. Basically, this is a personal thing that I'm a Chinese overseas student, and I hope UK and China to have better relations. And if you and me, you will definitely have exactly the same opinion.
Wow.
But of course,
you
I love the students from
talk,
other countries.
Sushao, you also talk in your manifesto about increasing the number of postgraduate representatives on the Union Council, so that there is a one-to-one parity.
Yes.
Do you not think this is somewhat hypocritical after you resigned from the Union Council?
Colin, I can explain to you that the reason why I resigned, because I don't think it's appropriate to talk about discuss the geopolitics in Union Council. But after I resigned, I still sitting as an observer in the Union Council, and I participate in every Union Council meeting and to participate in the discussion. So my resignation doesn't impact the postgraduate representation in the Union Council. But in opposite, I think the number of PG reps in the Union Council is not enough, because we have about 50%, but only 1/3 of them is postgrad students. And I think definitely in the future, this number should increase. I mean, I hope this number can achieve 1-to-1 ratio, but I'm not sure. But I hope this, in some extent, the number can be increased, 5 or 6 seats. I don't know.
Interesting.
I will negotiate with the new union council chair.
Anvesh, I want to ask you. You know, Zhu Xiao has a clear advantage in that he has done this role already. What experience do you have to bring to this role?
So yes, it's a good question.
I got a lot of experience about because
Zhu Xiao, let him speak. Let Anvesh speak.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me properly? First of all, my connection was really bad. I could not hear anything.
Right. Tell us about your experience.
You guys have to understand that. Now the connection is better and I cannot talk about these things. And tuition fee point is very important for me. So do you understand? And that point I could not able to defend because of the bad connection, whatever it was. I don't know. You guys
Anvesh, tell us about your experience.
So my experience is about leadership is that I have worked in India as a campaigner for 10 to 15 years. And then as a campaigner for a different kind of leadership parties and something. Right now, I'm a student representative for Liabil student hostel. I have organized events for them, and I receive what I can say. I work for their cause, what problems they have, what issues they have. I don't have a great experience like Zixiao. It's okay, no problem. But I'm looking forward to have more experience as well. And for my debate points, if I talk about inclusiveness, diversity, and inclusion. That is important.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Let's go to our panel of pundits who've been watching you two debate. Thank you very much, both of you, for speaking to us. So, Sung Soo, Alex, Anch, thank you very much, you three, for attending. You watched that debate. Alex, you were the council chair during some of the more exciting periods this year. What do you think of the two candidates' performance?
Well, the internet connection couldn't be helped, but one thing that really stuck out to me was Zixiao talking about having one-to-one representation for postgraduates and undergraduates on council. And well, there's not a one-to-one ratio of undergraduates and postgraduates at Imperial. I was the one who was looking at the council seats and how they should be distributed between undergraduate and postgraduate, and it is done proportionally. Unless he's against proportional representation, then
you think that's not a feasible suggestion?
Yeah, for sure, it's not.
Yeah, okay. Sung Soo, both candidates brought up their international connections. They were both very keen to talk about how they would benefit international students. Do you think home postgraduates might be disappointed by some of the things that were said today?
Well, it's hard to set aside their cultural identity that they feel strongly about. I think if anything, this was their chance to really connect on a personal level. I mean, especially Anvesh, who we hadn't seen much in the union before. So I think home students really will attach on to their ideas about Zixiao's ideas about his representation network for NSC students, which is pretty important. I think they get overlooked often because of their lack of time in Imperial, because they only last 12 months. But I think, very big on internationals as they come from international backgrounds themselves. Imperial has a very flourishing international.
So you don't think that was a negative?
Well, I think it. I don't think it would alienate people. No.
No. Okay.
And it really showed their passion, that what they think is important. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A positive then. Anch, obviously there is a disparity in the experience that the two candidates have. Zhu Xiao obviously having spent a year in the role. Did Anvesh convince you that he had the skills required?
Well, unfortunately, the internet couldn't be helped, so I would have liked to have seen more from him. I think it is interesting to see more from a new candidate rather than someone who've already had in the role for a year. I would like to have heard more from him, but I guess we couldn't. But I guess, yeah, with jobs like this, experience is important. Being in the role for a year is an advantage. You already know what kind of things are realistic, what kind of things aren't. That's why Zisha was able to say, oh, I don't think your tuition fee reduction thing is very realistic. He's coming from his perspective of what he thinks is possible, whether or not that is actually true or not, but yeah.
Yes, although there were, I have to say, I was slightly concerned because I think there was Zhu Xiao hasn't had, I don't think, the best time this year. In his manifesto, he talks about wanting to introduce a minimum research supervision hour for postgraduates. As far as I'm aware, from my conversations with with postgraduates, this exists. The problem is the enforcement and the ensuring that it does actually occur. So it's an interesting question of experience. Now, Sung-Soo, you are a postgrad yourself. Do you think the candidates addressed your concerns? What would you have liked to see more of?
Well, I think you've unfairly picked on the only undergrad in this panel, but so yeah, I think the question would be better posed to Ansh and.
Okay, let's ask Ansh.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Let's ask Ansh. Ansh, as a postgrad, do you think that the candidates addressed your points of concern?
I don't think they did. Like both of them. Like with Zishao, I get where he's coming from when it comes to like postgraduate representation. But I would agree that currently on council it's proportionate. So I don't think it needs to be equal, because that would mean that undergrads would be disadvantaged when they should be more represented. But yeah, I do get where that point is coming from, because postgrads are often neglected because everyone assumes that, oh, the student body is mostly undergrads, so let's listen to what the undergrads have to say. That might even have been shown in like this safety net from last year, which was very tailored to undergrad courses, but not so much the postgraduate taught courses, for example.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yes, that often they can find themselves disappearing, falling by the wayside and having their views not necessarily represented very well. Alex, what did you think?
I mean, I think that's a really good point, that postgrads aren't as engaged in the union, and I was pretty. It wasn't. I don't remember seeing in their manifestos really trying to talk about getting more postgrads to be especially involved with the GSU, because the GSU, as far as I know, tends to have pretty low engagement. So I think that the whole issue of having fewer postgraduates in general union council roles or general union roles is not an issue with the way the roles are allocated, but rather making sure that we engage postgrads.
So you think engagement is the most important issue that isn't necessarily being addressed?
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. Well, thank you to you all. You've been very helpful, and I hope our viewers have found so too. Shall we move on then? I believe we have a video for you. Hi Felix, out for a stroll? Quick question, have you remembered to vote? Don't panic, you've still got plenty of time. You can do it on your phone. Look, I'll show you. After you've logged into the e-voting system, this is what you'll see. A home page with a list of the positions that you'll be able to vote for. Let's click on one of the positions and go to vote. The list of candidates can be found here. Their names, photos and manifestos are found below. Voting works on a system of single transferable vote. More details can be found here. This means that you are asked to rank your candidates in order of preference. You do this by putting a 1 next to your favourite candidate, a 2 next to your second favourite candidate, and so on. You also have the option to vote for Ron or to reopen nominations. You vote for this if you feel that none of the candidates are suitable. If Ron wins, then there will be an automatic rerun of the election, and students will once again be asked to put their names forward in order to find a better candidate. It's important to list as many preferences as you feel able to give, as this will mean that the winning candidate is the one that most students will be happy with. Once you're happy with your votes for one candidate, click on Submit and Continue. This will save your votes and bring up the ballot page for the next candidate. Continue doing this until you have finished voting in all the elections that you have the right to vote in. Well done, you've finished voting. Now, all there is left to do is wait for the results. And we're back. So we're moving on now to the council chair position. This was not predicted when I recorded my original video. So the ICMSU presidency did not receive any candidates. So we've brought in the council chair candidates to fill up the space and discuss their equally as important role. So, Anch, would you please bring in the candidates? Hello, Michaela. Munti, how are you? Good, good. I will remind you of the rules. You have 30 seconds of protected time where you can lay out your manifesto points. And after that, I will ask you questions and you are free to interrupt each other. Michaela, would you like to go first?
Hello, I'm Michaela, your Deputy President Education. I've been on council for 4 years now, and I believe there's a lot to improve, especially around engaging students. I want to use council to give you the power to challenge college decisions, to scrutinize what the union and full-time officers have been working on, and to hold them accountable. I also want to make sure that you know what council has been up to and what papers are being discussed, and to give you the opportunity to get involved in how the union itself is run. And
that's 30 seconds. Munti, how about you?
Cool. Well, 30 seconds isn't much. So just to summarize, really, I guess my main approach is around transparency. I think that council is really amazing. We often make some amazing changes which go through council. But I think where we're really lacking is the transparency. Nobody knows when council happens. It's open to all students, how many students actually engage with it. And so I want to increase the transparency. I want to increase the training. I want to make it as accessible as possible. I think the role of council chair and the members should be to facilitate all of the students out there who have amazing ideas to make changes.
And that's your time. You got five seconds. I'm sorry. Right. Okay. So, you both talk about engaging students more directly with council. Michaela, you talk about bringing in the petition system. Munti, you talk about the petition system. And Michaela, you talk about pushing back against college actions. Is this not, an example of hubris that you've got this great idea that council is this enormously powerful body, but actually it's rather irrelevant? Munti, do you want to respond?
Well, what I would say is when it comes to the actual students on the ground at Imperial, they don't actually know what council is. They don't realize that there's this really powerful tool where they can go to it, they can present a paper, they can actually make change. But actually what I found
could you describe an example, a successful time when council has brought about significant changes to student lives?
Well, look, I mean, you know, if you look at all of the different papers which have gone through council in the past, there's been some really fantastic ones, even this year. Again, even if it's not there to make change, council isn't necessarily a place of power, but I think what it is a place of influence, and it's a place where you can influence people who do have power, whether it's, you know, through the Alice Goss paper that went through. We had Zhichao on earlier, who was obviously talking about the Grand Huawei paper. And what it has done is
Alice Gast remains. You know, Michaela, what would you say that, you know, the council is a lame duck body?
So I obviously understand your concern that you see that the council probably isn't as effective as you would maybe want it to be, but it's definitely not that the council has never achieved anything. Like, there is a very recent example. Last year, the Halls rent debate, although like most of the work was done by Abijay and Shervin in the negotiations, council support was very crucial to it. And without council support, the discount that was negotiated would not have been possible. So that is one of the things that council has achieved in the past. And it is really important. I would just like to point out, and like Munti has already said it as well, it's really important to have more student engagement in council, because the more students engage in council, and that can be through a petition system, or it can be through them coming to council meetings and participating in discussions, it means that there is more weight behind what council decides and behind anything that we then go on to bring to the college.
And you know, were you to be elected to the head of this august and powerful body, what would you direct your energies towards?
Is that for me? Question for me?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, as I said, I think it's really important to engage students more. And I think this is partly, it has to be done through better advertising. So currently, I don't understand why council doesn't feature in the union newsletter, right? It is an important thing that students should learn about, and the union newsletter is there to inform students about it. It could feature on social media a bit more. Things like that are really important. But there's another side to it. And the reason
students don't want to. It's boring.
No, can I? Yes, Callum. So the other side is that a lot of students don't actually know how to properly engage in union council, and they find it boring because they often don't understand. It seems like, you know, politics, and you have the papers that are written in a very technical terms. So I think better training and better introductions to union council, and you know, for those students who want to engage, so that they know how to write a council paper, how to properly discuss council papers, what to look for in council papers, and what to look for example, in the officer trustee reports. I think that's really important. And, you know, it might be boring, but there are also ways to make council more interesting. So, you know, yourself, you would be live tweeting about council on Twitter, and the Felix editor, that's what they would be doing. And I think that's another way of making council a bit more accessible to students.
Yes, right. You know, Munti, again, on this accessibility point, which you both seem very keen about, you know, is it not a bit of a sort of self-perpetuating farce that, you know, you get more people involved and then you get people running for council? You know, what would you do with the power? You know, what would you, rather than trying to improve accessibility, what would you actually do with the power of the council chair position?
I would say that council is only as powerful as the papers that students propose and the papers that people put forwards. And what I found this year is, coming into council, there is a really high activation energy in order to engage students. And so what we need to do is to make it as easy as possible, make sure, you know, what I've done this year in my role as a CU president that sits on council is to engage with all of our members. And I've spoken with students, and what I've actually found is they do have the passion, they've got the ideas. Everyone is passionate about something, but they don't know how to take that idea and to, you know, essentially go through the process to engage with the union. And actually what I've done this year is to work with students in order to bring papers to council and, you know, more on their way. And it's really, you know, resulted in, you know, this real kind of shift where actually students do want to get engaged, but the real issue is that they don't know how to get engaged. There's too high a bar, too high an activation energy. And I think that actually increasing the transparency of the whole process, making it as easy as possible for people to engage, is the biggest barrier that we need to overcome right now. And I think
that's interesting. Let's take a question from the audience. When council comes back in person, will the candidates ensure it takes place in its historic home of the Union Dining Hall? Michaela, would you like to comment?
Yes, so I've been on council, as I said, for 4 years now, and this has been a discussion item throughout my time on council. The reason why we rejected that, so I understand that it's like very nice for council members to be, you know, in this historic dining hall, but actually union spaces in the union building are really important for our clubs and societies to use for their activities, their training, whatever they want to do. And the union dining hall is one of the best places to do their activities in, and they are really close to their storage. So I would say this wouldn't be definitely on top of my priorities list. I think there are better users of the space. And, you know, if there is time, if there isn't any CSP booking, we can, of course, sit in the union dining hall. But that isn't the most important thing about council.
There you go, Lloyd. There's your damning answer. I suppose you know who to vote for now. Let's take one more. Council meetings are already 2 hours each. If we have more papers from increased engagement, how will you make sure those papers are properly debated without extending meetings further? Longer, more frequent meetings can cause lower engagement. That's from Alex Oyang, our current council chair. Munti, do you want to respond?
So I think this is where actually it's important to make sure that we've got a stringent process. We obviously want to make sure that what is coming to council and what we are debating are the motions that most people at Imperial are really passionate about. And so obviously what you don't want is the really specific niches to come to council, which might be actually be better going through either specific departments or other places. And I also think that the petition system, which obviously is very long overdue, and I really want to push to see that being implemented.
Which has been discussed for what, 3 years now? What makes you so special? Why will you bring it about when no one else is?
Just to focus on this particular question first, I actually think that the way that petition system is set up is that, you know, there's a kind of stepwise system of when something gets enough attention, then it comes to council. And I think that using that as a kind of funnel to make sure that what is being debated at council are the things that most people are passionate about is really important. And on the petition system specifically, you know, I am aware that there's been a lot of kind of background work that's been done in terms of moving the ICU website over to Drupal 8 or whatever. And I believe that transition has now been shifted. And I think that actually what we really need is just someone to keep pushing it and to keep putting it on the agenda. I think that it's very much become something which was passed and then priorities went elsewhere, and it's just fallen through the gaps and it's fallen through the net. And so I just think that it's a matter of keep pushing it as a priority, and it's up to the council chair.
As I said, you know, we've had years and years of people talking.
I would argue that it has been lost through the net, and it hasn't really been raised up.
And you will be different. And you will be different.
Yeah, I will be.
Yeah.
No,
well, you heard it. You heard it here. You heard it here. Michaela, I'd like to ask you, you were running to be the head of the Graduate Student Union yourself, and you withdrew, coincidentally around the same time as Zhu Xiao withdrew from the council chair election. There have been rumors that say that you discussed this in order to make your own runs easier. How would you respond?
So Zisha and I obviously speak on a regular basis because he's the head of the Graduate Students Union. I am the Deputy President Education, so we talk about representation matters and other things. The main reason why I withdrew from the GSU President election was because, well, there were two reasons. First is very obvious one, I can't hold both the Council Chair and the GSU President role, obviously. Secondly, I will be starting my PhD at Imperial next year, so I will be in my first year of my PhD. I felt after discussions with various people, including, you know, Abiche, including other people in the union and other PG reps, that I was probably not ready yet to take on the position of GSU president, to take on the position of the representative of the postgraduate students, because simply I will not have had enough experience.
But that doesn't explain why Zhu Xiao withdrew from the council chair position, surely.
You know, I think Zisha, you would have to ask him, and you had him here half an hour ago.
Did you collude with him? Did you discuss it with him before?
I mean, we did talk about what we were running for, obviously. We didn't like make a deal or anything. We just discussed the roles that we were running for, and also...
And did him stepping down as council chair and you stepping down from GSU president form part of that conversation?
I mean, we definitely talked about the roles that we were running for, but
it wasn't part of that conversation.
Part of what conversation, Monty?
Did you discuss with Zichao you stepping down as council chair no, sorry, you stepping down as GSU president if he steps down as council chair?
It was never
I think what Munty's asking was there a quid pro quo?
No, there definitely wasn't a deal. There was definitely a discussion around, you know, we are both running for a role, for two roles that we can't both hold. So, you know, this is something that either I would have to decide before the election or after the election if I got elected into both of these roles, and the same would apply for Zishao as well.
And you only just
we'll have to let the voters decide whether they believe you or not. Let's do one more question, and then we'll answer Lloyd's question. You both, you know, there is a third candidate running. She couldn't make it here today. You two are both current sabbatical officers. Do you think that makes you, you know, insiders and part of the problem?
What I would say is, I actually think I would say that I'm probably not, because I would say that if anything, I would pitch myself as kind of edge of establishment, in that this year was my first year on council. I was able to come in with a real outsider's perspective, and that's where I obviously identified, you know, things that were really great about council, but also things that can be improved. So I think in many ways, you know, I've seen both the good and the bad, and I really want to address the points that.
So you're saying Michaela is part of the establishment.
Well, I'm saying that she's obviously been around for a lot longer. She can answer that question herself. I'm just, you know, commenting on myself and where I position myself to be. But, you know, I'm sure Michaela will have her own view on, you know, how.
Michaela, are you the swamp?
So I wouldn't say this is necessarily a disadvantage, Colm. And you know that the council chair position is a position that is best held by someone who has some union experience. You know, you wouldn't want a fresher chairing the most important decision-making body of the union. So I think both Munty and I have good experience that makes us suitable candidates for this. And I think it is, you know, you might say, oh, you are a part of the establishment, you will be a part of the problem. But as council chair, you're not necessarily, you know, responsible for making decisions. You're responsible for facilitating discussions. And you're not there to be, you know, giving your opinions. You're there to make sure that you absorb the opinions of others and you give them the platform to present the opinions that they have. So I don't think my current role and my experience will be preventing me from doing this role effectively.
Just to add, I think what I really have is really varied and diverse experiences. And I think that what I am able to do is pull together all of the various different experiences that I've collated over the years. For example, just in my last year as ICS MSU president, I've put a massive emphasis and focus on transparency, on communication, and I've learned so much from doing it, from publishing meeting minutes, revamping our website, our newsletter, providing weekly updates to all of our students, providing monthly stream updates, better, you know, signposting, our council reports and everything else that we do. And it's worked really successfully, in my opinion, on a very local scale. And I think that I've learned a lot of experience from that, which I can pull together into the role of council chair, which I otherwise wouldn't have collected if I hadn't.
And is that Munty? Is that what you're saying? You know, because you're both being very polite to each other, but you are in competition. You know, is that what you're saying, Munty? That you would do better than Michaela?
Again, you know, it's the people to make the judgment. It's the Michaela will have her own opinion. She'll think she can do better. I think I will do better. That's just the way that, you know, these elections go, and it's up to the people to make the decision. What I am saying is I do have a track record. You know, you can see all of the hard work that we've put in over the last year. But, you know, like I say, I'm here to talk about myself. And Michaela
truly, Munty, you are red in tooth and claw. What about you, Michaela? Are you better than Munty? Would you be better than Munty?
So I think because of my experience, and I've been on council for quite a bit longer than Munty, I think I would do a better job. But at the same time, like, even if I don't win this election, and if Munty wins this election, I'm quite confident he would be doing a fine job in the role himself. So this isn't, you know, I'm not here, I'm not going to tell you how Munty is a horrible person, because I don't believe in that. I have a good working relationship with Munty.
I'm not asking you to slag him off, but I'm asking you to show why you deserve this role.
I wouldn't say this is about deserving anything, Colm. This is about trying to find the best person for the job, right? And I think with my council experience, I've been on council for 4 years, as I said, I think I have the most experience out of almost any student in the university right now to do a good job in the role, but that doesn't mean I would be the only candidate.
Right. Well, why don't we again, we'll leave that one to the the voters, because they have to decide which one of you they think is better. Lloyd, prolific with questions, has asked, how will you use your seat on the trustee board to represent the interests of council and volunteers? Munti, go for it.
Sure. I mean, I think that, you know, on the trustee board, I think that obviously that deals with a lot more of the kind of internal aims and objectives and running of the union. I think that essentially a big part of this is also around transparency and engagement with students, those who are on the ground, and also all of the different papers and everything that comes through to council, and just trying to feed in those discussions into.
Why don't you explain what the trustee board is?
Just quickly. I think that another big part of this is also, you know, it's a very much a two-way dialogue. So I think that actually what happens at the trustee board should very much be, you know, accountable to, you know, coming to council in order to basically describe what discussions are happening on that higher level within the union, as well as obviously making sure that we carry on with the accountability of the ICU president, all of the deputy presidents and the other sabbaticals. And in just to address that specific point, obviously the trustee board is basically you have all of the student trustees, myself, if I was to be elected as council chair, as well as the 2 student trustees elected in this election and those that go through the interview process. And, you know, it's very much an internally facing kind of board, which looks at the kind of accountability of the union, how the union as a charity and as an organization is functioning, its finances and its aims and objectives.
Okay, Michaela, oh God, I've completely lost my train of thought. That's very interesting. Oh yes, Michaela, you talk about in your manifesto about making SABs accountable. You know, that actually council needs to have a firmer grip. Would you talk about that a bit?
Yes, so I think this is something that, you know, has been discussed at council for years now. Council, this is one of the big purposes of council, is holding officer trustees accountable. So that's people in roles like myself right now. And currently there isn't much accountability. So I'm not, but I could be doing almost nothing in my role and there would be almost no repercussions, which isn't correct, right? Because I am being paid over £30,000 a year by the students to work for the students. And I think council needs to do a better job of making sure that people who are in our roles, I mean, it's all 3 of us in roles like that, are actually performing to the desired standard and also are listening to the students when they should be. And I think council very often has not been very good at it, because I think a lot of the students on council, they might be maybe afraid to speak up. And I know myself, you know, it's sometimes a bit awkward to just challenge the officer trustees in our council. But I want to make sure that we empower the students on council to actually make sure that they hold the officer trustees accountable. And
you heard it here first. Michaela is not afraid to criticize SABs. I'm afraid we will have to wrap it up there. Thank you both for attending. I hope our viewers have found it informational. Thank you both. Let's go to our panel of pundits. Hello, Grace.
Hi.
Who else do we have? Michael, fresh from University Challenge victory. And are we expecting one more? Alex, fantastic. So, Alex, let's start with you. Do you agree with what Michaela was saying, that council has been too soft on delinquent sabbatical officers?
It's a really tough issue in terms of keeping sabbatical officers accountable. The main format that we hear from them is through their reports. So they need to outline what they've been working on. And the thing is that you get 5 of these reports every council-ish, yeah. And then you need to read them, and they're not short documents, and they're not especially interesting. So it's hard to get people to read them, but I think that there is work to be done. I've tried to do stuff like having to go through the campaign promises at the beginning of the year and stuff like that. But there is work to be done to keep SAPs to account, mostly through getting people more engaged and reading the papers and stuff like that.
So you would agree that what they were talking about with their engagement point is crucial.
It's crucial. I think it's crucial more in the sense that you want depth from the people already on council rather than width, right? Because it's a representative democracy, right? So if we only have so much time to talk about papers and whatever, but if we have every council member very engaged, reading all the papers, ready to write them, and to talk a lot in council, then I think that achieves more than sort of widening it too much.
Widening it, okay. So Alex is pro keeping people
No,
out.
well, that's not what I've said.
No, of course. Grace, as working class officer, a large part of your role involves broadening access and trying to help people who would otherwise maybe not get into council or reach these positions. Do you think that council needs to do better to address not just working class students but other less represented groups?
I think so. I mean, they're doing to an extent with all the liberation and community officers. That's a good start. That does give everyone some sort of minor representation, but personally, they might not be totally relevant. But especially post-grads, they need more representation. I've thought that since I think the first meeting I ever came to on council. But the thing that I'm thinking about after everything everyone said is they're talking about increasing this, who is participating, who's being represented, but not much on how, especially, I'm Munty especially, I'm not quite sure how they're planning to do these, but Michaela, I'm a bit more clear on how to do it.
Okay. Michael, what would you say? Who won that furious trading of blows?
I'm not sure it was such a furious trading of blows. I think both of them are very qualified candidates and they have similar experience. And it's a position where I think if you have the experience to lead the council and to actually just get that part of the job done, and you're someone who would be good to be on the board of trustees, then to a certain extent, you don't really need anything beyond that. And the points they made were very similar. There's
incredibly similar.
Too similar, in fact.
Similar to mine last year.
which does raise the question, and I throw this out to all of you. It comes across a little bit like the definition of insanity is bashing your head against a wall over and over again and expecting anything to change. In this case, replace wall with petition system. Alex, what would you say to that? What has stopped you from turning council into the legislative dolphin that it should be?
Well, I think COVID is a very good excuse for a lot of things, and I think that in this case, one of the things I really wanted to do coming to the role was last year was my first year on council, and I felt like the most productive discussions I had about council were immediately after, where a bunch of people from council would meet up, whatever, we'd go get some drinks or we'd just go talk in another room about what happened and what we should do, right? And I feel like that is what was really missing. I would have liked to have organized some sort of social events or discussions in smaller groups of council members, which you can do online, but it's quite different. But I think that, using those ideas next year or the year after or whatever, trying to get people on council to build more bonds. So for instance, stuff like if the officer trustees personally, you're more able to criticize them without them thinking that they'll take it personally, right? Because you already have a bond with them. So you don't need to worry too much about that.
Isn't that quite a big flaw in the system that it relies on interpersonal relationships rather than the sort of legislative hammer coming down?
Well, I don't think there's a very, very strong, a lot of people come onto council with relatively little experience, which is great, but it also makes it so that a high proportion of the council members will feel less able to engage, or stand up to the other members.
Michael, other student union councils around the country, engage in sort of ridiculous wastes of time, I think some would call it. I heard from someone who I think is probably watching now that at his university they were voting to change the names of buildings and pointing cannons at the vice chancellor's office during negotiations. Do you think that the sort of seriousness of council and the way how seriously it takes itself acts as a hindrance to engagement?
I think there is a balance to be struck. I think it's been broadly managed this year. Obviously, I think turnout has probably been lower because it's been online, but I think if you make it too serious, then people feel that they can't relate to it. If they make it too silly, then what's the point in bringing your incredibly pressing motion? That would have wide-reaching effects. So I think there is a balance with everything. I think... No, sorry, train of thought has completely gone. As it
gone. Grace, save him. Your role, as was pointed out by a commentator, your role is a recent creation of council. Do you think that is it's been a triumph?
Well, I think it was. I think there was the only thing I was a bit concerned about at the start, so when it was going through, there was a lot of discussion about the names. I think it was mainly about it being, is it politically correct, that type of thing. And I think there was a lack of engagement of actually asking the people it represents whether that name represents them. And I think that's just, that's a general flaw of council. I think that does go with engagement. Are they engaging the right people who we're supposed to represent? I think, my train of thought has also slightly gone.
Oh,
but
like a chain. Alex, go on, please rescue them. Do you think that council is a diverse enough body?
Yeah, I'd like for more, as I said in the last panel, I'd like for more postgrads to run for roles that are open to everyone. But I think that you can't have too many people in a meeting. Council's already 50-some people.
You can or you can't?
Can't. So you can have too many people in a meeting.
Oh, I was going to say that. Right? I think that's a very bold position.
Because you want everyone to be able to contribute.
Sure. And let's do final question. Oh God, it seems to be catching. Final question is... No, I've lost it. I will thank you all. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. And let's pass over to the DPCS debate. So thank you all.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DPCS hustings debate. I am the moderator of the debate. My name is Andy Wong, and I'm the Felix webmaster. I think we have 4 candidates in total who put themselves up for the election. Hopefully, we can see some of them today at our debate. We have India Marston and Mark Rich with us. Hello, welcome to the debate. And I'll go over the rules again very briefly. Each of you to begin with will have 30 seconds to introduce yourself and to put up your case for the election. After that, I will bring up questions to each of you. Some of them may be generic, some of them may be specific to manifestos. So yeah, let's begin with India. Introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm India. I'm the current Arts and Ents chair, and I've been on many different committees throughout my last 4 years at Imperial. I have 4 main points I want to do as DPCS. The first one is help clubs recover from COVID, get them back to the way they were before. Second one is spaces, make sure clubs can take ownership of the spaces they use. Third is communication. I want to improve the communication between the SABs and clubs. And finally, training. I want to provide training earlier and in a more flexible form. Yeah, I think these 4 points make me, oh yeah, sure, if that's long enough. Then.
Thank you very much. Mark, you have 30 seconds now.
Cool. Thank you very much, Andy. Hi, everyone. My name's Mark. The reason I'm running to be DBCS is I really want to bring activities back to Imperial, but what we need to understand is that clubs will need more support than ever before to bring them back. My scheme, what I'm trying to introduce are practical changes. So it'd be introducing a project, a scheme to bring activities back, add in triage sessions instead of usual email chains to communicate to officers, and then re-examine Imperial athletes. So I hope we can have a good chat today. And if you want to find anything more, read my manifesto.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've read through your manifestos, and one thing I've noticed that you both mentioned for trying to improve communication with the union. Now, as a member of Felix, I agree that there is room for improvement. India, you have mentioned that you want to bring up a ticketing system in order to improve the response time from the union. And Mark, you have mentioned that you'll run trial sessions every week in 10 minutes time slots. India, why do you think yours is better than Mark? And Mark, why do you think yours is better than India? Let's begin with Mark.
Okay, me. Yeah, so I think, so with triage sessions, I'll just explain how that works very quickly. So let's say, Andy, it sounds like you might have a problem. Rather than like an email chain, and email chains go back and forth, you wait half a day to get a response, or sometimes the union even longer, and you get a response and you don't like it, or they say no, you respond, it takes ages. So what I'm suggesting is you book through like a system like Calendly or just a calendar booking service, you book 10-minute video chats, and then I will solve that problem within that 10 minutes. We all know calls are so much more efficient than emails. And it's a different system. And I think the other advantage is it gives the union a face. So rather than this, I think lots of people see in clubs and societies, which I'm kind of very much from and being in lots, is that club and society, I think people see the union as this kind of mysterious body which takes ages to respond to emails and normally replies always no. So what we need to change is I want to know who my football president is, and I want to know them by name, and I want to have a relationship with them. And video chats, I think, will really help to do that.
And India, why do you think your ticketing system is better than emails, as we are currently having?
I don't disagree that face-to-face meetings are more efficient than emails, but I do think having a triage system where people just book meetings where you don't know what they're going to ask you about and you have to come up with an answer in 10 minutes is pretty infeasible. I think they're just going to be, the club presents a problem and then the person doesn't necessarily know how to solve it and they can't solve it in 10 minutes. And so it goes on and you haven't got any train of thought. Whereas if you have a ticketing system, you could track where the query has gone, who's answered it, and then you can also just set up a meeting. There's nothing stopping you from setting up a meeting through the ticketing system or as an aside from it. I also think that having fundamental triage sessions with the DPCS or other sabbatical officers skips through the management group structure and underutilizes the really important network of senior volunteers we have that have a great wealth of knowledge that clubs could use. Clubs will completely skip over this and forget that they have that knowledge which they can get faster than they can by just going to talk to a SAB. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, can I just jump in on that point? I was trying to let you finish, sorry. I think one of the problems with Zoom and all of these with Felix last year is you never know when someone's trying to finish speaking. Just on that triage system, so obviously what would happen is when you would communicate your problem, you would have them describe your problem to you. And obviously, if it was simple enough to respond in an email, you would be able to do that. This is for problems which you might need to explain and you could solve in those 10 minutes. It also starts the conversation, but yes, you would have a description of how that would work. In terms of the management groups, something that could happen, but this is something I would also encourage eventually management groups to look at as well. And this is not to say emails are no more like death to emails, where this is just an alternative system, which I think is at least worth a trial, because I know setting up meetings, it sometimes happened, but the union sometimes responses just could be, I think also on a separate point, I think accountability of, so ticketing system, I agree, could be in terms of just general accountability of response times. And I think potentially For example, we know like the NHS and people have response times in terms of targets. Potentially that's something we could think about as well, and just have a bit more accountability for unions to actually respond to people.
Well, that comes from the ticketing system, right? The ticketing system will be able to track those like metrics and be able to call out people who aren't responding to these things. Like that fundamentally helps fix that problem, or starts people on a track to fixing that problem. I think also the triage system is quite based about online systems like video conferencing, and I think it already exists when we're more in an in-person setting. Like you just run into someone and ask them a question, or you asked your management group chair about it and they don't know, so they went into the union offices and asked the DPCS. That's the normal relationship that management group chairs have with the sabbatical officers, and so it kind of already flows. Yeah.
Let me ask a question from Mark. Actually, Imperial has hundreds of societies. Do you think that you will have enough time to deal with all of the kind of triage sessions promptly? What do you think the calendar booking will be months in the future, and they'll no more efficient? Yeah.
So potentially, and that's definitely something to look at. And if it becomes something to trial, and then if people also, I think if people find it helpful and people find it more helpful in emails, you can always dedicate more time to it. I generally think it's worth a go, because I don't think emails of just even general back and forth email chains. For example, if we have a problem with you have your problem with a phone provider, you have a problem with your network or something like that, and then obviously they offer a live chat, or they offer email or a call. Everyone wants to go for the live chat or call because you get a solution straight away. The problem with emails is that yes, they're helpful, and yes, they are not going away, is that for some problems it takes days and days and days to sort it. And I think so. And also, it's not just that. So I know in your sort of problems won't work, but I think it's worth trying. And also the societies I've endorsements from, or the people who represent societies. So for example, football, who are one of the largest societies at Imperial, or largest sports society at Imperial. The president of that has said that would be helpful. And I have several presidents of societies said they at least want to try it.
Thank you very much.
Quickly respond to that.
You'll have 30 seconds for it.
Yeah, sure. I think the issue with the triage is something that Andy brought up a second ago, and that I think they will get booked up, and therefore you lose the advantage of it being a quicker response than an email, because they'll be booked up like weeks in advance, so you won't actually get a quicker response at all. It would be way slower than an email.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have to move on to another topic, which has been quite contentious since I think it was last year, and that is Imperial athletes. Now, both of you have mentioned it in your manifesto, as I believe. India, you have said that you would like to ensure all clubs can benefit from Imperial athletes. And Mark, you have said different clubs have different needs. I indeed agree with that. Now, we have covered the controversy around Imperial athletes, Felix issue 1752. If any viewers would like to have a look, it was in the archive. One of the main contentious points was the flat £25 per year membership fee. To some societies, that was actually higher than what they normally charge, and to some societies it's lower, which led to some smaller societies like Pose and Ariel believing that they are actually subsidizing those larger teams. India, what proposal do you have to solve this situation?
Yeah, so I actually read that Felix article when I was researching for this role, and that's why I want to be more transparent about how the money is spent, in particular in the concerns for the smaller societies. I want to be able to show a breakdown of what money goes directly back into the club that the membership fee is being paid for, what goes to Imperial athletes as a whole, and what it's being spent on, in a way that all students can access, for example, a web page online, and potentially also discussions on the sports board. To make sure clubs know what they're getting and that it's worth it for them.
And Mark?
Sure. Yeah. So it's good to hear that. I think myself and India both agree that Imperial athletes should change. So I know India sort of mentioned that it's from current or smaller societies. So I'm actually from one of those smaller clubs. So I am treasurer of Imperial Cycling. We have about 50 members. Our problem with Imperial athletes is that. So I think it might be actually worth. I'm not sure, Andy, if you allow it, but maybe 10 seconds or 20 seconds to actually explain what Imperial athletes is, just in case people haven't heard of it. Or
yeah, you'll have 30 seconds. I'll give you that quickly.
So Yes, of course. So what Imperial Athletes aims to do is try to amalgamate every sport to have similar branding and a similar membership fee, as you said. And so what it's trying to do, and then also apart from that, is also the permanent position. So Move Imperial are trying to take some of the power of some stuff away from clubs. Their philosophy for that is that if you ask for things as a group, you get things cheaper when you ask things individually. I do agree with that. So
Okay.
I think. Sorry, can I just
thank you
push
very
my
much.
point? Sorry.
Yep, thank you. I guess once to reiterate the problem that I had in the beginning, do you think the £25 flat fee needs to be kept? Or do you think it needs to be something different from the financials?
I mean, is that aimed at me or Mark? Sorry.
Either of you, really. India, you can begin.
I obviously haven't looked into the financials of Imperial Athletes because it's not something I cover at the moment as the Arts and Ents chair. But I do believe that the concept is good, but it was rushed through without appropriate student consultation, and I don't think the union had a full understanding of what it wanted to get out of it. So I think it definitely needs a review. I wouldn't necessarily say we'd definitely be changing the fee. It might be reasonable once you actually look at the numbers.
Mark, quickly.
So what I need to do is they need to speak to every single club. At the moment, I haven't spoken to many sport clubs. I haven't seen a single one who like it. Everybody hates it. The reason people hate it is because nobody was asked. So what was brought in is, and also, for example, with cycling, this £25 fee is saying nobody knows where it's going. And the main problem with that is that we're asking people, so we're asking the people who run Move Imperial what the clarification for that is, and they haven't actually decided themselves yet. Yet we still need to decide. But the issue with that at the moment is it's so rushed that we actually need to decide on some of those decisions now, but they haven't decided what it is. So it definitely needs, I think, consulting every club is key.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I agree.
I think we'll have to move on to the audience questions. Michael Cohn, I think, was shown on screen briefly earlier, said both candidates are discussing managing the time of ambitious projects. DPCS is a very full-time role. How will we, the electorate, be convinced that both of you are up to the, or either of you are up to the workload?
I'll start.
India? Yep.
Yeah, so I'm a JMC student. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's maths and computer science, and it's often termed that we do 60% of each degree. So I feel like, first of all, my degree has a massive workload, and I've been very adept at managing that. But also, throughout my entire degree, I've been taking on multiple committee positions each year, as well as being the year representative. I think I'm very adept at managing my time and going to every meeting and giving my all to everything. So I think I'm capable of taking on big projects as well as managing the day-to-day responsibilities of DPCS competently.
Thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, I think we can title sort of all Imperial degrees as like very high workload. So, so for example, design engineering student. But yeah, but also on top of that, so for example, this year I've been working on an ambitious project with the Ideas Lab, which is trying to change how making is done at Imperial, and this is running a fully fledged, so with a student-run makerspace with £100,000 of equipment, over 30 student volunteers, which I've recruited and managed, liaising department, liaising with external contractors. So I'm definitely able to balance multiple things in a week.
Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. I'm pretty sure there's still plenty more questions to be asked, but unfortunately, we don't have time at the moment. So that is the end of the debate at the moment, and I'll bring to Callum and the panel to review the performance of your debate for the panel members.
Well, Andy, so what did you think of that? No, were they convincing?
I think on the matter of Imperial Athletes, they kind of talked about the same points, which was the general kind of the lack of communication with the clubs. They weren't that much different on that point, and especially they didn't talk about the financials, which I think was quite important for a lot of clubs. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Ross,
can I come in and talk about Imperial?
You I'm going to come to you. We've butted heads on this before. Will you explain a little bit, why Imperial Athletes is maybe not so bad, and talk about, what, do these candidates really understand what Imperial Athletes is trying to do?
Great. So thanks, Callum. I think both candidates raised some good points, but I think both are also slightly misinformed in some of the things that they stated. So Imperial Athletes was originally called the Sports Hub and was thought about kind of 3 years ago, and it's been 3 years in the making. With consultation with all club presidents in previous years, and kind of it fell to me at the start of this year to implement some of that phasing in of Imperial Athletes and how to do that in COVID rules as well. So with limited ability of clubs to be able to do stuff, there was admittedly a rush at the start of the year to get something in place so that students would be able to play sport this year.
But Ross, do you think these candidates understand what Imperial Athletes is doing?
Right. So moving beyond this year, moving into next year, what does Imperial Athletes aim to achieve? I don't think either candidate fully understands the potentials of Imperial Athletes. I think Mark possibly does more from his sporting background, and it's very easy for someone who's not been involved in sports to say it doesn't work. If you speak to the rugby club, the hockey club, a lot of the big team sports, it works, and there is more work. Mark is right around the smaller clubs and how they benefit from mass purchasing, scales of efficiency, etc.
It's a discussion. It's an ongoing discussion, but I think it's interesting that both candidates are coming out against it.
Nick, absolutely. So
Nick, go on, Ross. Let's
talking to club captains.
Let's go to Nick, as unsporting as he could possibly be in his journey. Nick, I'm gonna slightly put you on the spot here. Making everyone look the same. Actually, I'm not going to attack Imperial Athletes, Ross. No, I'm not. Let's talk about something else.
All right,
Nick. The India comes from an arts and ents background. She's been very involved in musical theatre and dramsoc, which are very big roles. Mark, described his experience, which admittedly, sounds like quite a challenge as well. Would you say that they both demonstrated the same amount of experience, or do you think one was more convincing than the other?
I think that if I had to choose between one of the two, I'd probably say that India showed a little bit more of an appreciation of how, I guess, irritating communication really is. I think the triage system that was proposed by Mark it has decent aspects, but I think anything implemented as he described it will inevitably get clogged up and become kind of useless. And I think it kind of caters to a tiny subset of problems which are both so simple that they can be explained in that amount of time, but also complicated enough that you can't find a solution yourself. I don't know what problems these are. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was about to say that on that point, I probably think the triage system is better, because when you send someone an email, it's quite easily for them to just put it off, and then it gets buried in the inbox, and they never really get back to it. With the triage system, if you talk to them face to face, you're going to say, okay, they kind of have to give a promise for you, and it's much easier to explain what the thing really is with a kind of spontaneous communication. Whereas an email, you don't know if they're actually understanding your problem, but with a face-to-face communication, it's much easier to get the point across.
I think that's really. Sorry, go on.
So let's check in with the man who has ultimately been responsible for these problems this year. You obviously won't have been able to do as much face to face. What would you say to Nick's comment about that unique type of problem, both complicated and simple enough?
So they both have valid points, and each has their flaws. A triage system may be slow, and you might not have the responsiveness you need, whereas a 10-minute time slot, any solution that you come up within that 10 minutes, it is likely to be a rather trivial problem in the first place, but an urgent one. So you need the urgency of being able to go into the union and solve those problems, which we haven't been able to do this year because the union building has been shut because of COVID. So yes, emails are a bit slower. But one of the things we are looking at implementing at the moment is an MS bookings system that will enable CSPs to talk to coordinators and me. We're trialing it at the moment. I think Mark has a very good point that sometimes meetings are necessary. And we've not quite got it right so far this year, and we're looking to change that. And I'm sure Mark will try and continue that if it does work.
So yeah, and what would you say about their relative experiences? Because of course you came yourself from the sports world, the hurly-burly of ACC. Do you think the tights and pumps of musical theatre give you the backing you need, the experience you need to run the DPCS?
I think they both come from very different backgrounds. Obviously, Mark is heavily involved in running a space, as he mentioned, with the Ideas Lab and setting up a space to be run and organised by volunteers and operate thousands of pounds worth of equipment. And space is a very important side of the DPCS role. He also comes from a club background and has been involved in that side. India comes from the arts and ends background, which is much more of a management perspective. So she's got much more of the people side of things. So they both bring different things and different experience. I don't think either has the full experience that you can get doing this role. No one coming into this role has the full experience to be able to cover all of the management groups.
Nick, there was a sort of brief mention of COVID. What do you think needs to be done by a candidate? What does a candidate need to be saying to sort of show that they are going to help clubs recover from what has been a difficult time?
I think it will depend. I mean, obviously depends a lot on individual clubs. I will say that I think the nature of COVID, at least in a general sense of kind of getting things going again. Obviously, the kind of government regulations, everything notwithstanding, but there will be a massive impetus there already just from students who are desperate to do anything to get things going again. I don't think they'll have to try particularly hard to try and encourage clubs to restart again, because they've been waiting to do that for a year. There are maybe subtle financial issues which have arisen in various situations. I obviously couldn't comment on how various clubs have been affected by perhaps a worse year than if they've been planning for some big thing in a few years or something and they've failed to see anywhere near as much money as they would have liked this year. I don't know. These individual cases will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, but I think in general, yes.
You don't foresee enormous collapses of the club ecosystem.
I don't think so. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I guess for us, there's a good idea of what the club ecosystem looks like at the moment. I can see a tiny part of it. From what clubs have been trying their best to run as they, to run under the circumstances. Obviously, running fewer activities has invariably led to way fewer expenses. I think for a lot of clubs, it's probably felt like a kind of year on pause. And I have full confidence that for the majority of them, it will be it won't be too hard to get back into the swing of it.
To bounce back. I mean, yeah. Andy, you've seen our efforts at Felix to try and adapt. Would you agree that clubs are ready to bounce back?
I tend to think so. I mean, people generally didn't have much interest this year, but I'm pretty sure it's just isolated to this general mood of COVID and people don't want to do anything. I mean, you can't do anything really. But once things reopen up, it's very much likely that everyone's just going to go crazy. Yeah.
Ross, agree, disagree?
Oh, well, it's a difficult one, right? You've got your well-established clubs that will continue to run. And the less established ones who have maybe found it more difficult to function this year will probably need more support next year. There's £90,000 of funding currently for clubs to be able to adapt their activity and move online and maybe do more over the summer that they traditionally wouldn't do. And I think both of them will have a challenge to support those smaller clubs. there's sufficient funding, and both will take their own different approach to it.
Yeah, it's that bloody curse of nuance, isn't it? No, wouldn't it be easier if everything was simple? Thank you very much, you three. I think we're going to go on now to the Deputy President Welfare debate, but first we are going to show a clip from our Felix lockdown documentary, where Felix team members explored the effect of the November UK lockdown on students. And this extract that you're about to see is taken from the second episode on the effect of COVID on students' mental health.
You realize when you don't have them anymore how like important and how like happy they make you feel.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. We'll do our absolute best to try to make sure that we get life back to as close to normal as possible for Christmas, but that is going to depend, I'm afraid, on our success. From Thursday until the start of December, you must stay at home. You may only leave home for specific reasons. These areas will enter a new Tier 4, which will be broadly equivalent to the national restrictions which were in place in England in November. In England, that means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
Well, I wouldn't say I have struggled with my mental health because I guess everyone feels more lonely during this quarantine, like lockdown situation. So I think that's more or less like a common thing that happens to everyone. And I guess I'm just one of them who feels more lonely during lockdown.
I think during first lockdown, at the beginning, it was fine because we had exams in May, I think. So for like the majority of the first bit of that first lockdown, I just had a really good work routine, and I was just working, and like there was, I had a purpose, I guess. And then exams were over, and in summer term maths first years, like we do an individual project, but it's quite open-ended. Like you can do what you want. Like you can choose to spend as much or as little time on it as you want. And I think I found that period quite difficult because of the lack of structure and also like the pressure to keep in contact with friends.
When we went to full lockdown during March, yeah, it was. I struggled a lot. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, because those times where we were living under very uncertain times, and we didn't know how this virus is going to act, or how long we're going to be under lockdown.
Going to be brave and more open this year. So basically, I have BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, which has made this whole thing quite up and down, because one of the things is that you have the inability to control your emotions, quite they fluctuate a lot. So it being stuck in a house sometimes, like the smallest things. I remember one day, we got our council tax letter and we hadn't filled it out, and I was freaking out. I was having a meltdown. And I remember that was the day I started all these new tablets they put me on, because I couldn't cope.
This COVID thing has changed a lot of things actually. So I'm basically my studies is sponsored by the Commonwealth Commission. So actually there's a lot of trauma I have gone through for this particular thing. So what happened? I got my offer letter, the formal official offer letter in the September. Then the CSE has deferred my scholarship, that due to some delays due to COVID things, we are not able to give you scholarship this year. Then, I have tweeted, Facebook page, and then I write 10 mails every day to my Indian government and then to the CSE. And then later, after 1 month of regular mails, they replied me back that, okay, fine, we will consider your scholarship, and then fine, we'll give you.
It's really hard for me to structure my day. And I often find myself wandering around, just wondering what to do. And even when I was self-isolating, Christine and Grace will know, I would literally go and bug them because I was bored. whereas like normal people would probably have found something to do.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Eamon Farhad, Felix Art Editor, and I'll be moderating the debate for the Deputy President for Welfare. So the candidates, well, I think just one candidate today, which is the wonderful Natalie Potter, a 30 physicist who is eager to take on this key role. Hello, Natalie. Hope you're doing well today. So just tell us a little about yourself and just maybe summarize your manifesto for those who haven't read it before.
Hi, my name is Natalie, and I'm a third-year physics student. And this is actually my last year, but also my 5th year in trying to get my degree. And so a lot of that is due to the fact that I've had a lot of struggles with mental health as well as physical health, chronic health issues over the last 5 years. Really just a very different trajectory from what I had originally anticipated going into university as a fresh-faced 18-year-old. But I don't regret any of it. Spending 2 years of my student life in treatment has really given me the opportunity to have a great level of empathy and understanding for people who struggle and who have chronic issues, whether it has to do with mental health or physical health, and the impact that it can have on student life as well as academic success. And it's given me a lot of education as well. I have received a lot of education on psychoeducation, proactive welfare, as well as effective interpersonal communication, which would all really help me in this role. So I have 3 main issues that I want to tackle as president of welfare. The first one being relevant to the documentary clip that you just showed, which is isolation during the COVID pandemic. And I have a number of ways in which I plan to do this, and one of the main ways is by bringing in animal therapy. And I believe that this would be really critical in helping students feel a bit of a sense of normalcy as well as connection within their homes, as it really has helped me as well in my personal recovery journey. And my second goal would be to improve safeguarding for survivors of sexual violence in Imperial College, as there are a lot of holes, basically, which need to be filled in the way that college handles these cases. And finally, my last objective will be to implement a welfare officer position in every club, society, and project in order to provide greater support to all of our students as a whole.
Thank you, Natalie. Those sound like some great ideas. Just want to start off by asking, what are your experiences so far within college, maybe student volunteer positions or welfare positions that you've held? Can you just kind of summarize your experiences and tell us why that's brought you to wanting to run for this today?
Right, so I have had a brief position as treasurer of Imperial Cross Country and Athletics, and I have been a member of cross country and athletics for about 2 years. I've actually stepped away for a bit due to distance from the college during the pandemic, as well as needing to focus on my health. But it's been a wonderful experience. They've given me a family away from home. Living in London as an international student has been really difficult for me in terms of isolation, even before the pandemic. And so it's given me a great sense of purpose, as well as community being there. And I think that's something wonderful that our clubs and societies can provide that I would like to further support as a CSP. And unfortunately, there are a lot of ways that still need improvement, and just as in general for all of our clubs and societies in the way that college operates as a whole. And a lot of these issues, I can't really speak to specifics due to concerns of confidentiality, but there have been concerns around welfare as well as safeguarding, which really need to urgently be addressed.
So you talk about wanting to put a welfare officer in every single club, society, and project, which I think is a great idea. But do you think there will be any issues trying to implement this, or any clubs and societies that might not want to do this, or some that might not be able to? How would you deal with that?
I think the most important thing to consider in terms of having it be effective is to provide adequate training for welfare officers. I think it would be really important to make sure that they have a good amount of psychoeducation as well as a good amount of preparation for things to look out for, as well as certain situations to be on the lookout for. So adequate training would be really important as part of our general welfare network that they would be joining. And as far as societies that are reluctant to implement it, I think it's really important to try and present it as a way of providing additional support rather than a punitive measure. The idea really is just to provide additional support to students, and as well as an outlet for students to express concerns and struggles that they're having in a more welcoming place, and as well as to provide a forum for how things can improve.
Okay, so one thing that I think is really important is obviously, we have lots of stuff happening on campus itself, but a lot of things happen in the external world, which can also have an impact on students. It can create trauma for students and can really be something that weighs on students' mind. The big one is COVID, of course, right now, but I think some other things that happened recently, for example, the police brutality in America over the summer, which obviously continues, and more recently, the Sarah Everard killings in London and the vigil that took place on Friday, which was all over social media, and many people, women and other people across the campus may have lots of trauma linked to this. So how do you think the college can support students and ensure that they're an ally during these events that happen outside of the college?
I think that's a really good question. And I think my goal as a welfare officer will be to make college as supportive and as safe of an environment as it can be for our students, as a sort of bubble, as it were, from the rest of the world, at least a place where you can go and feel safe and not really have to worry too much about watching your back for at least a few hours during the day while you're on campus. I really just want it to be a place of safety for all. And I think a good way to go about this is first by education and promoting a culture of wellness and safety. Really providing a lot of education around consent would be really critical. Maybe instituting some talks around consent during Freshers Week would be really beneficial, as there are already some, I think, around safety around alcohol for international support students, but making that more widely available during Freshers Week, I think, would be a really key implement.
I think when it comes to sexual harassment on campus and even just students who undergo this, it's something that's talked about a lot. Candidates year after year will talk about these types of things, but how will you, if you were to kind of set some kind of bar right now as to what you would say would be a successful policy or some kind of successful outcome from your year in this role, and so in a year's time you can look back and say, were you successful in trying to do this? What would be something that you try and measure, or something you try and put in place, something more concrete?
Right. So I think the main thing that I would want to collaborate on with college is making a concrete policy or set of guidelines for how to safeguard students who make complaints about sexual harassment. And because right now there currently is lacking. We are currently lacking in a set of guidelines for how to protect students. So in a lot of situations, this can lead to students submitting a complaint and then not hearing back for a very long time afterwards, which can lead to dangerous situations in between the time that the student submits the complaint to when it is addressed or for when they receive a reply. So the main thing about safeguarding is that it needs to happen quickly and immediately, and it needs to be effective. So just having a set of guidelines for how safeguarding is going to happen, how it's going to affect the student who is submitting the complaint, as well as the student on the receiving end of the complaint, would, I think, be helpful for all parties involved, as it will provide a lot of clarity and a lot of structure for how these disciplinary processes will go through in the future. And I think another really important thing, apart from making sure that safeguarding is immediate and clear in its steps, I would really want to urge college to pursue action in their disciplinary process while or before any sort of police activity takes place. Because right now the main problem is that college's policy is that all kinds of investigative or disciplinary action is halted if a police investigation is pursued. But the problem with this is that it can take the Crown Prosecution Service up to 3 to 4 years to formally charge a case, by which time both students will have likely graduated. So it's really important to hold college accountable and making sure that it goes through with protecting its students.
Definitely, I think that's very important. Now, obviously, we couldn't not talk about COVID at some point here. I think that COVID obviously has been a big thing this year. You know, next year maybe things will get better, and the impacts of it will be lesser for the next year's freshers. Now, I spoke to some freshers about your manifesto, and you do mention something about kind of bringing in shelter animals to the halls to kind of improve some welfare, which obviously is a great policy. But do you think there is some kind of deeper things that you could do? And now I don't want to talk about this past year, but I think the really important thing is that COVID has happened, and some freshers right now feel they're going to be the lost generation of students who will have long-term impacts due to COVID, whether it be not making lots of friends during freshers, not having a support network, not being able to have a real first year. This will impact them for the rest of their degree. So how will you ensure that even after COVID is finished, these students who are freshers this year will still have the support in place? And what are some things you can think, for example, for next year that could be done?
All right, I think that's a really excellent question. So aside from bringing in shelter animals to sort of mitigate the detrimental impact on mental health that COVID isolation has been having on all of us, I think a really good idea to add to support for students in general is to form virtual support groups for people who are struggling with different types of issues, whether that be depression and anxiety, eating disorders, or things related to trauma. I think just having a place where you could go and speak to other people who are going through the same thing could be really helpful. As in my personal treatment and recovery experience, milieu therapy has been the single most effective therapy that I've ever received. And just having connection there, as well as a place to form secure attachments, I think could be really beneficial for a lot of people. And of course, that'll I think hopefully by interacting with and collaborating with the counseling center, we can set up some training for facilitators of such groups and make sure that it's as safe and effective of a space as possible.
Now, Natalie, you seem to have so many very good ideas. I think that one thing that some people might be worried about is that you haven't, held many positions in the union or in college at all, and you're coming into this with kind of a very new mind, but also you don't really know maybe how everything works. What would you say to those people who'd say you don't have enough experience for this role?
Yeah, so I think that's a very fair question. And to that, I would say that most of my experience does come from outside of college. I've been in treatment for 2 years, and in such places I have actually had roles of leadership in which, in 2 of my residential treatment centers, I was an elected patient representative, in which my role would be somewhat similar to college, bringing up issues of welfare and sort of advocating on behalf of other patients. And while it was a bit different, it was within a setting around treatment and therapy. I really had to learn how to be an active listener, as well as how to effectively communicate ideas and suggestions for improvement to an authority figure. So I believe that would really help me in at least communicating needs to a larger body, as well as for how to go about navigating how things work in the union. I do think that'll be a challenge for me, but it's one that I'm ready and willing to take on, and I'm willing to put in all the extra hours if need be. If I need to spend 12-hour workdays at the union, I'm more than happy and willing to do that.
And what do you think is the single most important characteristic that is needed for this role?
I think the single most important characteristic that's needed is compassion. Really just truly having an open mind and willing to see what other people are going through and being willing to help in whatever situation they are facing. Truly is, and in my experience, I've had really high opinions of the people who've been in these positions in the past, and they really have made a difference for me personally as a student, and I really wish to uphold the same standard of care
Okay,
for others as
we've got
well.
some audience questions right here from Maria. She asks, how do you plan on supporting the reps network and reinforcing the reps network? So this must be departmental reps you're talking about.
Yes, so that is an excellent question. One of the things that I've heard from within the union is that there currently isn't very much support for people who are providing support for others. So that's another thing that I'd like to do as well, by having a place where welfare reps as well as people who are involved with mental health can sort of come together and have a sort of support group or support network of their own. Basically just having a support group that is occurring on a regular basis where people can bring forward stresses, worries, concerns, obviously on a confidential basis, no naming of names or anything like that, but having a place where they can come forward and just share what they're experiencing, I think would make our whole support network a lot more effective, as in order to provide the best support possible, we have to be feeling well ourselves.
Just one other little question here, something a bit more positive. In your time at the university, you said you've been here for a few years. Can you tell me about a successful policy or action or event or something positive as far as welfare goes that you've seen that you might want to build on or may want to do again?
I think the implementation of the welfare network has been really good, really key. And just having a welfare representative within departments has been a really good idea, especially in expressing student concerns directly to their departments. I think that's been a really key part of communicating our voice, the voices of the individual students directly to college. And that's something that I would like to expand on a bit more. I think by having a welfare representative in every CSB, that'll be another way in which students can feel that they can have a direct voice, a direct impact.
Now, you're someone who's gone through a lot of mental health issues. It's what you talked about at the beginning. Do you think the college is a place right now where people can talk about these things openly?
I think it depends on which kind of environment you're in. There are certain social circles where that kind of thing is very open and very accepted. And there are certain social circles where there's a bit more of a stigma. And there have even been maybe even cases where the same set of people or the same group has sort of evolved to become a bit more or less accepting of the discussion of certain topics. So I think maybe just education as a whole would be helpful for removing the stigma for this entire community, and having people who are advocates could really, truly help.
Okay, well, thank you so much for all of that, Natalie. I think that was a really interesting debate there. We'll move to our panel now and discuss that debate. If we can move over. Thank you so much.
Hi, Eamon.
Hello.
That was hello, thank you for being here. I think it was an interesting conversation you had with Natalie. I'd be interested, Shervin. I've known you for a while now, and I would say you work pretty hard, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
What does a week look like for you?
Oh, that's a tricky question. It changes so much. I think for all of the OT roles, it's quite, in terms of workload, pure workload, it's quite variable by the time of year. So, things kind of start a bit quieter where there aren't that many meetings, just kind of getting into the groove in kind of August, September. But then it ramps up so quickly where all the college meetings start, you're preparing to train the reps, and then your week can become a 12-hour day very quickly.
Yeah. So I suppose I would say, Marley, having seen, we'll watch Natalie. Do you feel confident that she would be up for that?
Well, I think that she doesn't have that much union experience, but I think that it's a good thing to have someone who has not been so entrenched in union politics to come with fresh eyes and try to make a change. And she has a lot of experience with actual mental health and dealing with people with mental health issues. So I think what she said about compassion is the most important thing. And as she said, she will put the work in. So I'm confident that
Yeah.
it's more important to have the experience on the mental health side than
Yeah,
the
and I suppose I follow up question. You are currently involved in a campaign to fight sexual harassment. The examples given by Natalie, of how to help students, through the provision of animal therapy, and building awareness. Do you think that is enough to create a more mentally healthy college environment?
No, I think that definitely what she talked about reporting, that is something is definitely important. When I was trying to make an article about how to report in the union, it took me 10-15 minutes and I was still not sure who and how I should go about reporting an issue, either college or imperial. So her talking about how important it is to have awareness about how to report something and make it easier for people to report is the most important thing. Because I was just doing it for an article. If someone has an actual problem and they have to spend minutes or hours trying to look for someone to solve this problem, they're going to give up. They might want to give up in the first place when it's really hard to come out and say, I had a problem, I have an issue.
Yeah, and we the Felix sex survey last year found a shocking number of people had suffered sexual harassment on students in general and some on campus. I would throw this question out to you all. Do you think the college and the university and the student society that we are part of has a problem with sexual harassment itself?
I can sort of maybe come in. I think it's hard to quantify what a problem really means. Like in my view, if it happens at all, it's a problem, that needs addressing and we need to do something about it. So I guess then the answer is yes. I think over the last couple of years or so, I've had an insight into how these things work at the college. This does tend to mostly happen at the college rather than the union, just because we don't always deal with that kind of stuff because we're not best placed to. There are a lot of issues, a lot of things where people can slip through the cracks or issues slip through the cracks. And I think definitely in terms of how issues are responded to, there is a problem that I've sort of been trying to work out myself. And it's requires a kind of big cultural shift, I would say.
And Eamon, were you encouraged? I mean, firstly, would you agree with Shervin? And as a follow up, were you encouraged by what Natalie was saying? Did her promises have weight to you?
I think Natalie had a lot to say about this issue, and when I asked her to be a bit more concrete, she did seem to have some type of idea in mind of what she really wanted to do. And I think having those guidelines in place would be really, really important. And she does seem like someone who, as she said, wants to do it and do it quickly, because it's very important to not leave any cases left behind.
Yeah, I mean, let's move on to, I think, probably her sort of signature headline policy, which was the having of a well-being officer in every club and society. Again, throwing it out to you all. How feasible do you think that is? Do you think clubs would be open to that? Do you think they should be forced to adopt that?
I mean, I was the welfare officer for a club for the LGBTQ society, IQ, and when we have one every single year, and I only actually once was it ever really came of any use. So I think that it is something that's good to have there, being visible and a point of contact. And these people aren't there to solve everyone's issues, but it's more there to signpost students. So I think it is feasible to have them there as signposters, maybe not there trained really deeply with all these different things that Natalie was talking about.
Yeah, Marley, you are key advocate for this. What about you? You are involved in a lot of societies. Do you think societies would accept the imposition of a well-being officer?
Yeah, definitely. This year, as Chilean president, I created a new position, welfare officer. And just this year, when we had maybe 7 very active members, 2 of them wanted this position. So out of 7 people, 2 wanted it during COVID. So I imagine when there's more actual active members in a society, a lot of them will be interested in this position.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a problem finding people in any society that would want to do it.
Shervin, do you think this somewhat steps on the toes of the Wellbeing Reps network?
Not at all, really, because I think it's they're very different purposes. Students engage in CSPs quite differently to the way they engage with reps, and it's a different kind of dynamic. I would just say that a lot of the time, the obvious solution to something of let's just throw like some more student roles at it, like, is not always the best, because we see we threw in about 100 wellbeing reps 3-4 years ago, and it's definitely like had successes, but it's still not in a position where that is fully supported and kind of going how it should be. Callum, if you don't, could I come back to something we were talking about earlier real quick?
Of course you can, Shervin.
So I think a large thing in kind of Natalie's campaign is drawing on her personal experience, and I think what I just kind of wanted to say something about that, where I think my experience, this is my second year doing the role, and was deeply involved in welfare representation for 2 years before that. So kind of been in the business for close to 4 years now. I think my strongly held belief is previous personal experience is not in itself a qualification, but it can give you some insight into issues that people experience. It is not more important than experience in representation and experience in campaign and advocacy, because it's not in itself, it's not the thing that gives you that compassion, but I think there are things that you can draw on it. So I think Natalie has shown that she's like able to understand issues and can
let's throw this to the panel.
I just wanted to say, Shervin, you referred to this as a business, which I think is the worst word you can use for someone whose role is to deal with people with mental health issues. So,
well, Melinda, I think you don't understand the role then, because that's not what my job is. I'm not here to support one-on-one students with mental health issues. I'm here to represent a body of 22,000 students. We've got
to wrap up. We've got to wrap up. But let's answer this question. I'll ask each one of you. She is running unopposed, so could very easily. Do you think she's got what it takes, Eamon?
Yeah, I do. I think she does have what it takes, and I think she'll be well supported for this role.
Shervin?
I don't think it's a yes and no answer. I don't know. I think more should have been drawn out from the debate in terms of her specific ideas, so I don't have a clear answer.
Melinda?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, well, there we go. Let's wrap up, and we'll move on to the DPE, Deputy President Education role and debate.
I'm sorry, I think you were muted.
Oops, okay, that's embarrassing. Okay, sorry, I was saying, this is the DPE debate. I'm here with Haitham and Lucia. And Haitham, if you can start with a 30-second speech about introducing yourself and your policies, starting now, go.
Yes, hi, my name is Haitham. I'm a former student of Imperial College. I got my PhD there in 1990, and I'm currently a master's student in my second year doing public health. My manifesto has been published. I'd like to ask the college for better support for mental health for postgraduate students. They experience higher anxiety and depression than the general population. I'd like the college to give students some of what they pay in terms of if.
That's all. Okay, thanks, Haitham.
Okay,
Lucia?
thank you.
Yeah, Lucia, if you could start yours.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm a current fourth-year chemical engineering student at Imperial College London. And this past year, I've been working as a education officer for the City and Guilds Student Union. So I've been working really closely with academic dep reps, faculty staff, as well as with the current Deputy President for Education. And I really want to empower students to make change happen. And I really want to improve student experience for both undergraduates and postgraduates. And I have several ideas that I...
That's okay, thanks. We'll go into your positions anyway. Okay, now, Haytham, let's start with you. In your manifesto, you promise free Chromebooks for every student, as well as free hot meals. So I wanted to ask you, how feasible do you think that is, and how will you go about achieving that policy commitment?
Yes, I promise that I will ask the college for this. I think it's very feasible. The average, the student, home student pays £9,000 in fees. Overseas students pay much more than that to study at Imperial. I think it's feasible to ask the college to give them back a small portion of that money, which is, I don't think it will exceed £1,000 to offer them a Chromebook and to offer them a hot meal, a daily meal for each. So I think it is very feasible, and I think it's also very good. It gives that prestige for the college. It gives that security for the students, and I think it's a good request. And I think I'll proceed with it should I win this election.
Okay, Lucia, what do you think about this policy of Haytham's?
I feel it's very ambitious, and given that some students don't really, some people don't really like to use these, or prefer other mechanisms. So I do feel it can be possible, but maybe not everybody will be represented in this decision.
Okay. I also wanted to ask about your manifesto, Lucia. You talk about, for example, the fact that there have been decisions that college have approved, some ideas, but many of them haven't been implemented on a departmental level yet. I thought that was pretty vague. I was wondering if you could clarify more on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I hope if I get elected for this position to work really closely with faculty and relevant staff to implement some changes. For instance, I'm currently the education officer, and I'm really wanted for all the departments to give feedback after exams, but I still haven't managed to do that. So by getting into this role, I really hope to make this change and for every student to get feedback after their exam. I feel that's really valuable.
Okay. And Haytham, so you ran for this position last year as well. I was wondering, what made you want to run again, despite not being successful last year? And are there any differences in your campaign this year?
Last year, unfortunately, I couldn't make the debate. I had to miss the debate, so I felt that was a big minus for my campaign. And this year also, I focused on other issues such as better support for postgraduate mental health and other things that you can see in my manifesto this year that wasn't present in my manifesto last year. So I decided today to give it the full whack, if you like, and go for it.
Yeah, sure. We have an audience question as well. What about the students where a Chromebook is not sufficient to complete their studies?
In what sense, not sufficient? I.e., technologically is not sufficient, or it's not?
Because I'm assuming they mean that because every course is different, it might not be what everyone needs.
I think that's the general idea. If you, if it wins, if the principle wins, then the nitty-gritties can be worked out later. But this is the general idea. This is the general request from the college. This is what I'll be putting to them. And if they agree in principles, then we can try and tailor make it to individual needs.
Okay. And Lucia, you've been in the academic rep network for a while. I think you're currently the education officer of the CGCU. So I was wondering, what do you think your experience in those roles has given you that means that you can perform very well as a DPE?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I've greatly improved my communication skills. I've become more confident communicating with the different faculty reps and union representatives too. So all the communication skills I've strived for, I've improved, will definitely help me excel for this role. Yeah, the communication skill is the key one, I would say.
Okay. And what do you feel is different about the DPE role? Because it's a full-time role. So while you do have experience as a volunteer academic rep, what do you think will be the main difference? Have you looked much into how the role will be different to your pre-existing roles?
Yeah, so since it's a full-time role, I would be dedicating all my time to make this change that I want to happen. So I would be really, I would be speaking and communicating with all the faculty reps, with the union, to make sure the change I want to implement happens. And I would be coordinating and scheduling different meetings to ensure that my change, that the changes I want to push for are really become a reality and are not left in the backstage. So I would need to ensure I manage my time, my schedule, to ensure all the objectives I want to meet are met.
We also have another audience question. We have Lloyd. Haytham, do you think your alcohol-free campus policy is going to be popular with the student body?
I'm not concerned about the popularity. I'm concerned about whether it's the right policy or not. I decide on my policies as to whether they're right or not. And I feel this is right. You cannot buy a cigarette on campus. You cannot buy a packet of cigarette on campus, yet you can buy any alcoholic drink that you can. And in my mind, this is not on. The coming to university is not an opportunity to drink and to go into binge drinking as happens in many ranks of undergraduate students. Right. And I'd like to see, just like we see a smoke-free campus, I'd like to see an alcohol-free campus. And I hope people watched my YouTube and saw the studies that I have presented about alcohol harms. So I think if I can shield students from this early on, I would have achieved a milestone in terms of better education.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why you mentioned this policy like prominently in your manifesto when your role is for the DPE, you're running for, it's about academic concerns. I was wondering why you think it's so relevant to that.
I think it's a big academic distractor. I think many people underperform. I think by sometimes drinking and not paying attention to how much they drink. And you know what undergraduate life is like. It's some people misunderstand it as an opportunity to do so. So I think although it's not directly an academic issue, it's related to academic issues, and it's related to academic performance. So that's why I decided to put it in my manifesto.
Yeah. Lucia, what do you think about the alcohol-free policy?
I honestly don't believe it will be possible. I don't think any other campus in the UK has this, so I feel it's a really, really ambitious, although I do respect it and I do understand your point of views, I feel it's really ambitious and will be highly unpopular among many students who do enjoy this. And in the union, we even have a bar that sells alcohol. So I feel it's going to be quite ambitious and unpopular, although I do respect it.
Yeah, sure. We have another audience question. From Milia. What do you think are the main concerns of postgraduate students, and how will you ensure to represent these as part of the role? Lucy, if you could begin.
Yeah, definitely. So I feel the postgraduate students don't have a strong academic someone representing them that's properly representing them. So I hope to strengthen the rep networks within the postgraduate students. And also there are several issues with stipend extensions due to COVID-19. So those are some of the concerns also right now, and I hope to address all of this. Moreover, with COVID-19, there are many issues regarding no access to the labs and how postgrads, if their marks will be affected in some way or by not accessing the lab. So I hope to also make sure that they're not affected negatively by this, and I will make sure that they are really supported and then that their network is strengthened.
Yeah. And Haytham, your same question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so it's, what do you think are the main concerns of postgraduate students, and how will you ensure to represent these as part of the role?
I think, having been a postgraduate student myself, the main concern that students would have is A, to support themselves during their studies, B, to get sufficient training to be competitive in the research market. I think these are the two main concerns that postgraduate students have. And one of the things I would be doing is lobbying for more teaching time for postgraduate students to teach more undergraduates, because these days having some lecturing experience is very important if you apply for lectureships, etc., etc. Universities want to see that you have actually taught undergraduates, you have participated in the teaching process, etc. So that's one thing that I would like to ask for. And the other thing is I want to ensure that every postgraduate student gets proper training. I know when I was a postgraduate student, I really loved to have learned some molecular biology, but I didn't get the chance. And I want that every student who wants to learn a technique as a postgraduate, he or she will have the opportunity to learn that technique and satisfy their curiosity and be equipped to be an imperial postgraduate, to be very competitive in the national and international research market.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask one last question, then we'll move to the panel. So, Lucia, what do you think is the biggest impact from the pandemic that students have faced academically?
I would say the biggest impact was the transitioning to online learning and having all the lectures online via Microsoft Teams. That's one of the major impacts that this has had, as well as all the exams being conducted remotely and having to adapt to that. Students also that are in the US or China having to adapt to these crazy time zones, and also the lack of social interaction because of the pandemic that has also affected many students. So those are the main. Yeah. Thank you.
Nathan, what do you think?
I think isolation. This is one issue. Many students got isolated. They got their social networks were weakened, and sometimes their family networks also was weakened. Also adapting to online education, it's not easy. You get very much distracted when you're learning online, and you have to actually focus, and you're learning on your own. You're sitting in a room on your own studying. Lack of exercise, because if you want to study a lot sitting down, that's gonna have an impact on sports, etc. And anyhow, all gyms or sports facilities were closed. So I think that's another thing that affected students. So I can see these three issues as major issues.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you both for contributing to this debate. I'm going to move on to the panel now. So I'm going to bring in Callum and Michaela, who's the current DPE, and Isabel.
Hello, thank you, Ansh. I think that was quite an interesting experience, wasn't it? I think two very different candidates, and I would be interested to hear what you had to say about Haytham's drinking point. Michaela, it's not something you ever considered, is it?
I think banning alcohol on campus is firstly not within the remit of my role, and secondly, as you said, it's not something I've considered because I don't think it is a good idea, even if it was within the remit of my role. What I found a little bit concerning about that is, like, often candidates will have points on their manifestos they will come into the elections with, and that can be points I disagree with, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. What I found a little concerning was that Haytham acknowledged that this is not what students would want, but he did not seem to care about that. He said that he would be he would be driving his decisions by his own personal beliefs and not by what the students want.
Because I made a note. You know, his point about the lecture experience. It's, you know, I think that was really quite a good point. You know, that actually, you know, Michaela, you're starting your PhD. No doubt, it's the sort of thing you will be looking for. Isabel, did you find that Lucia, you know, was sufficiently, you know, proving that she was better than Haytham? You know, was she countering his points?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's only so much you can prove about yourself before having any experience in the role. And if you, like, for any of us who are students, like, we don't actually know in fine detail what the day-to-day of the role would look like. So I think there's only so much you can do to prove yourself. But I think she did a fine job.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you say that though, but you know, you yourself have been a rep, you know, right from the beginning. Do you think she has that same level of experience?
I'm not sure, but it's not. I don't think it's necessary. It's like a hard requirement for someone to have rep experience. I think it definitely helps, but I do think there's a lot you can learn, and I'm sure Michaela would do a really great handover, and I don't think it would be a major barrier to anyone running. And in fact, I don't think it should be, because I don't think we should limit people running for the DPE role purely based on whether they have academic rep experience.
I would probably, I mean, I agree with Isabel. We shouldn't be limiting people, but I think having academic rep experience is so crucial for this role, especially because, you know, from day one, you will end up being in discussions with the college, dealing with very senior people, and having the experience. And, you know, I was a rep for 4 years before coming into this role. It really helps so much, because negotiating with the college is a skill that you can only learn by doing it. And if you're already coming into this role, having had done it for a few years, or at least a year in a different role, that helps so much.
Yeah. Ange, what would you say? You know, which candidate for you? Because I think there was a I think that both were maybe a bit light on policy.
Well, actually, I would say Haytham wasn't light on policy. He had very strong policies. In my opinion, I think they are a bit, you know, magic money tree, not to use that term, but yeah. Whereas with Lucia, I do think, you know, her great asset is that she's got experience in the rep network. But I did feel, yeah, her manifesto was line policy is quite vague. I tried to give an opportunity to expand on that. But yeah, I do think those points needed to be, you know, expanded on, clarified. And I hope she does that in her campaign.
Yeah. Michaela, obviously you've had to deal a lot with students struggling with lockdown things. You know, actually, do you agree that is still the most important thing? You know, surely by next year things will be back to normal. You know, what are actually the issues that we should be looking at? Now, you know, I'd ask everyone on the panel. You know, surely this has been a pause. There must be more important things to talk about.
So definitely, I wouldn't say that next year things will go back to normal, because they definitely won't. You know, even if you listen to what the government experts are saying, even next year there will be some limitations to the student experience, but we are hoping it will go as much back to normal as possible. But we are still expecting it will be an issue. And obviously students who are in their first year or second year this year, they will not have graduated by next year, right? So they will still be around and still feeling the impact of potentially the missed learning from this year. But obviously there are other things that the students are facing. One example would be, you know, assessment and feedback. The lack of proper feedback has been a recurring theme. We are one of the worst universities. I think this year we were like the third worst or second worst university in the whole country, according to the National Student Survey, when it comes to assessment and feedback. So that is definitely, I mean, there are other problems, and it's important for the DPE, you know, not to focus just on the immediate issues, but also think about the wider student experience, I guess.
Yeah. Isabel, you've had the experience of completing your third and final year, under an almost constant lockdown. Do you think you need extra, work? Do you require remedial work? Should a potential deputy president of education be talking about that?
What do you mean by like extra work?
As in does at the moment there's been a move to do a mixed learning, and I spoke to the interim vice provost for education at the beginning of the year, and she said, this is the same quality of teaching. What should in suggesting that students aren't losing anything, what should a deputy president education potential candidate be saying about this issue?
Okay, I think it's a really difficult question to answer, because I don't think it's fair for students who are impacted by the pandemic, because it's not their fault at all, to be given any extra remedial work, even if it does help them like reach the level of academic standard that they were initially promised. But at the same time, I understand why students are upset, and I personally am also not entirely happy with all the lab work that I missed out on. But I think it's just a difficult question that I don't think you'll be able to satisfy everybody, basically. And I think what the DPE should be doing should be to find ways to provide students with the help that they can provide while students are still at university. And I think this would include working with lecturers and to provide extra resources for students, and also building up a sort of community that allows students to work in a sort of team environment without necessarily having to be on campus or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that team. Let's last couple of questions. And do you think that people at Imperial are taught how to work together?
I feel like competitive nature is encouraged here, like not just among students, but also staff, in terms of like how publication metrics and everything is done. I think that's very much the nature of Imperial. I'm not sure collaboration is a motto.
Yes, well, a lot of work to be done. Should we wrap up there then? I believe we've got a video. Thank you to you three for coming on.
Hi Felix, out for a stroll? Quick question, have you remembered to vote? Don't panic, you've still got plenty of time. You can do it on your phone. Look, I'll show you. After you've logged into the e-voting system, this is what you'll see. A homepage with a list of the positions that you'll be able to vote for. Let's click on one of the positions and go to vote. The list of candidates can be found here. Their names, photos and manifestos are found below. Voting works on a system of single transferable vote. More details can be found here. This means that you are asked to rank your candidates in order of preference. You do this by putting a 1 next to your favourite candidate, a 2 next to your second favourite candidate, and so on. You also have the option to vote for Ron or to reopen nominations. You vote for this if you feel that none of the candidates are suitable. If Ron wins, then there will be an automatic rerun of the election, and students will once again be asked to put their names forward in order to find a better candidate. It's important to list as many preferences as you feel able to give, as this will mean that the winning candidate is the one that most students will be happy with. Once you're happy with your votes for one candidate, click on Submit and Continue. This will save your votes and bring up the ballot page for the next candidate. Continue doing this until you have finished voting in all the elections that you have the right to vote in. Well done, you've finished voting. Now, all there is left to do is wait for the results.
Hi everyone. Now I will be hosting the debate for the presidential candidates, and with me will be Lloyd and Millen, I believe. Okay, so as you guys know, the purpose of this is for me to ask sort of informative questions so that voters are able to make an informed decision on who to vote for. So we'll begin with 30 seconds each for you guys to introduce yourselves and explain the key points of your platform and why people should vote for you. So Lloyd, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Lloyd. I've been involved in the union for quite a long time as an undergrad and PhD student rep, as RCSU president and as chair of the student council. My priorities are to build stronger communities of students, to more efficiently support our union volunteers, to work for all students so we better support postgraduate and medical students, international students, and those not based at South Ken, and to get a fair deal for students, including fair assessment that accounts for this year's setbacks. So please vote Lloyd for union president.
Great. And Millen?
Hi, it's your boy Millie. Welcome to Twitch chat. And my manifesto is about never going to give you up. I won't let you down. I won't run around or desert you. And that's basically why you should vote Millie.
Amazing. And with 15 seconds to spare, that was brilliant. Okay, so my first question is about what you see the main challenges of the upcoming year will be and how you as president will address them. Lloyd?
Sure, yeah. So I think the main challenges are the things that I've outlined in my manifesto. So I think sort of coming out of COVID, there's going to be, a huge importance of rebuilding student communities which have suffered over the last year. I think the way to do that is through supporting clubs and societies to sort of rebuild those communities at a local scale. I think that, we need to make sure that assessment going forward is fair and that departments are taking into account the issues that students have faced over the last 12 to 18 months, last 12 months, I should say. And I think that there are other more long-term issues that we need to be dealing with as well. And urgently, I think we need to be more efficiently supporting our student volunteers. So I think historically, it just takes far too much time and far too much effort to get certain kinds of support from the union. I think that's a priority for me as well.
Okay, and with regards to getting like a faster response to help students, I feel like that's something that a lot of candidates before you have tried to fix. So what concrete steps will you take, and why will your plans work when others have not been able to successfully do so?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. I think, one, there's a general point about, a few of the things that I'm promising are things that have come up a lot of years in the past. I think circumstances are really quite different at the moment than they have been historically. So historically, you look at, the average officer trustee might come into the role with sort of one-ish year of experience at the kind of level of council or trustee board in the union. So they'll have lots of great ideas, and then they'll come in and then they'll be working with a staff support team, many of whom will have been around for 10 years or more, and are quite entrenched in the way, their ways of doing things. And they'll sort of say, yeah, this is what our systems limits us to, this is what our financial limitations are. And often they can just, wait for 12 months for a new round of officer trustees to come in and not do anything. That's completely not the case anymore. For one, I have 5 or more years of sort of high level engagement in the union. Most of the support staff team at the top level is very new. And I think there's a completely different attitude within the union. There's a desire to transform and embrace change, and things are really turning over. I think now is really the time to be making these changes. And I think specifically on the point that you mentioned about sort of faster responses, I think one of the key things that hasn't really been talked about in the past is we can't improve something unless we can measure it. And that's why the ticketing system is going to be so important to that. If we can track how long it's actually taking us to deal with queries, and we can set targets and we can actually make sure that we're improving.
Okay. And Millie, do you have any thoughts on the ticketing system? Yeah?
Not really.
Okay, cool. So back to your idea of sort of this union support staff. So I know that the union has recently undergone a lot of like restructuring, and there actually isn't as strong support, I would say, in terms of support staff in the union. So how can you make the argument that you as a president would be able to provide, be able to deliver your promises with so much restructuring going on in the union?
Sure. I mean, I think for one thing, we are coming out of a lot of that restructuring. So a lot of that restructuring, a lot of the positions that have been turned over, we now have some long-term candidates for. I think over the next year, we're going to be filling a lot more of the holes that exist within the staff structure. So I think that will make it easier. I mean, it's a very fair challenge about how we can deliver things when the union is understaffed at the moment. There are still vacant roles. I think it's going to be, it's going to be difficult. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I certainly think it's possible. And it's about prioritization. It's about looking at, what are the things that really are important to students? What are the things that we really need to be focusing on, and make sure we can deliver on those, and make sure that we can sort of trim the fat, and we're not doing, we're not spending time on unnecessary things when we should be focusing on really getting back to basics.
Okay. And I next want to move on to the bullying allegations against senior staff members in the college. Billy, is there anything you would do as president to address these allegations, or anything you will do leading the union going forward?
I mean, it's bully for them, isn't it? They're just bit mad, bit sad. Can't believe they're there, innit?
That is very, very wise. Thank you. And Lloyd, what about you? What would you do in terms of managing sort of difficult relationships with the college now that the union has taken a vote of no confidence, and how will this affect your relationships with senior staff members?
Sure. I think that's a very fair point. I mean, I think something, we have to restate the importance of the relationship between the college and the union. Having a strong working relationship there is the only way that we can actually deliver lots of the things that we're promising for students. I think it's also worth noting that actually the majority of that relationship isn't at the very top level. So it's not between the president and the president, or the president and provost of the university. It's between all of the various people at different levels throughout the college administration, and there are lots of good sort of ongoing relationships with those individuals in the union, and those largely won't be affected. Yeah.
Then, but I'm sort of wondering what you will do in terms of leading the union going forward, in terms of we've taken a vote of no confidence. So what are the next steps in terms of this bullying allegation, or are we just going to let it be?
I mean, I don't think we should just forget about it. I think it's something that the union has made its position very clear, that they think that the president and the chief financial officer, they've admitted that they were involved in bullying. They've admitted that what they did was gross misconduct, and the union's position is that they shouldn't be retaining their roles. And I think that's something, that's always going to be our position. And if we're asked about it, that's always going to be the thing that we say. I don't think it's necessarily, going to be helpful to us to continue bringing that up at every single meeting we have with the college. because actually we need to be focusing on getting wins for students and delivering for students. And you know, I think the college has really made it very, very clear that they're not considering what we want. And so it should, you know, it should remain our position. We should continue to you know, speak truthfully about that. But yeah, I mean, that's my position.
Anything to add, Millen? Like, just your opinion is fine as well. Like, what?
Not really.
What
I wasn't paying attention.
doing next? Okay. And next, I guess we have some audience questions. So, Lloyd, what sort of communities do you envision for postgraduate students, and how do you propose bringing these about? In terms of supporting volunteers, how would you expand on the work that has taken place to improve training?
Sure. So on the point about postgraduate students, I think, you know, I am a PhD student, so I've sort of, you know, I've been involved in organising events and sort of social things for postgraduates. The thing that I've seen is to a much greater extent than undergraduate students, postgraduates want to engage with people in their research group, in their department. You know, that's really the level at which it's important to be trying to build postgraduate community first and foremost. And then obviously, you know, as we go out, we can kind of widen that. But I think firstly, the union needs to do so much more to support departmental postgraduate reps in terms of organising events for students within their department, and also thinking about, can we expand that to a faculty level, and what can we do with the constituent union structure and help the faculty unions to support the faculty unions to kind of build postgraduate community within their faculties. So that's the postgraduate point. In terms of the volunteers point and the training, you know, I think there's good work that has taken place over the last few years. We are in a better position than we were. You know, training was absolutely rubbish when I started six years ago or whatever. I think it needs to be earlier, or there needs to be the option for earlier training. So sort of in the you know, towards the end of the third term. And I think it needs to be more specific and more modular. So it needs to be something where people can figure out what are their training needs, and they can go and access that.
Okay, great. I hope that answers the audience question. And next, there's a question about constituent unions, and I would be really interested to hear what you have to say, Millie, about constituent unions. Do you think we should keep them or get rid of them, or how to preserve the culture of constituent unions, and if they're relevant in today's student community?
Jokes aside on this one, there's a big issue for the fact that there's no identity for constituent unions anymore. We're trying to maintain individualism for departments, and so it's hard to balance that with having a giant conglomerate that seemingly is unaccountable on a lot of things.
Okay, and Lloyd, what do you think of what Millie said, and what are your opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, you know, I think that Millie makes a good point about the loss of identity for constituent unions. I think that's something that the college has struggled with, you know, since the college system was abolished, 15 years ago now. You know, I do think it is important that we support the constituent unions. I believe in the constituent unions. I was the president of the RCSU. I think that the faculty level is the right level to be building a lot of community among students. Certainly, it's the first level to be looking at interdepartmental community. I think that, you know, we really do need to look at how we support constituent unions, you know, and recognise them as integral parts of the union, which they are, which our constitution says they are. How can we bring them more into the organisation?
So what's like a quick, like, one-liner of what's one idea that you would do in order to support constituent unions, very briefly, and then we'll move on to some audience questions.
Dedicated staff support. So I think that, you know, every constituent union should know a member of staff who they can go to in the union to deal with any query that they have. That doesn't exist at the moment.
Okay, that sounds good. Millie, what do you think of that idea?
Thank you. I think we've had enough of staff who've proven themselves not to be quite up to dealing with student issues. You know, we can't trust in our staff not to bully each other, let alone help us run student issues.
I think it is separate though in terms of like the union support staff and the college staff, but I understand that there is a lot of distrust in the student community. Do you have any alternatives to suggest?
Strengthen it from students, not from staff.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a audience question now. Lloyd, there's the reoccurring problem of students not really knowing what the union does. How do you propose to remedy that problem if you're the president?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really good question. I think, you know, the way that the union should really be reaching out to students first and foremost is through our volunteer network, right? We have this community of students, reps, club committees, other kinds of volunteer who do know about the union, who are keen on getting engaged, and by supporting them, we can get them to, you know, by sort of diffusion effect, more students will know about what we do. But I think there's also, you know, we need to know more about what are the right comms platforms to be using. Are we using social media effectively? You know, and we do have to accept that to some extent, you know, not every student needs to know everything about what the union does. But there are particular things that we should be pushing, things like the advice center, which really all students should know about, and you know, and where they can get more information about what the union does.
Okay, that sounds good. There's another audience question. So it's basically about a point in your manifesto about the new funding pots, and there's an existing funding pot called the Safe Activity and Community Building Fund. And so how would your proposed new funding pot be any different?
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. I'm not on the clubs and societies side of the union this year so much. I don't know the details of that particular funding pot. I'm aware of the Activities Development Fund, and that's something that has existed for a long time. And so my idea was that we'd be modifying that principle to specifically be funding events that have a sort of community support component, and potentially support certain kinds of events that wouldn't otherwise be funded by the union, because maybe they're not so relevant to a particular club's sort of key core aims and objectives, but they are relevant to community building. So that was the idea behind it. I'd need to look into, you know, the detailed specs of what the SACBF does to really comment on that a bit more, though.
Okay. And my last question is about sort of community building, just in terms of COVID times, because I know a lot of students are very unhappy with the way the pandemic has turned out in terms of their academic and social experience. Is there any concrete ideas that you have in terms of addressing these? Millie, would you like to go first?
I reckon we should have a Minecraft server, you know, just mining away. Don't know what to say.
Sounds fun. You should create one. Like, for real. Okay, Lloyd.
I don't know if I quite understood the question, but in terms of, you know, I think that potentially relates back to what I've been saying about supporting clubs and societies to, you know, to be at the forefront of our community building initiative. You know, I think, you know, the other thing the union does to build community is around our venues and around the events that we run. One of the other things I proposed is that there be a sort of student-led entertainments committee, so that we're, you know, the union is more actively engaging volunteers in the events that it organises, and you know, the effect of that would be to make sure that our events are more aligned with what students actually want to see.
Okay. I think that will be all for the debate. Thank you both very much for joining us. And we'll now move on to the panel where we'll discuss the debate.
Hello. Yes. And we have a special guest with us today, the admin of Imperial, one of the admins of Imperial and Imperial.
Hello.
To offer potentially a countervailing point to one that we might hold. I think there's I'd like to ask Abs a question. And I don't mean this to be rude. I mean this, actually as a sort of interesting question. You are something of a you're a friend of Lloyd's.
Yeah.
You know, you've worked with him in the past in physics. You know, you were at slightly different paths, but you sort of mirrored each other's ascents. There is a culture, I think, in the union of some people in being in the know and really loving the, you know, nitty gritty, silly bits. You know, it's the enjoying of Hangman because it's difficult to understand. Do you think, you know, Lloyd is very much the epitome of this, you know, the final product. Do you think that this drives people away from being involved in the union?
So do I think that some people being sort of very engaged, is this sort of an in-group, out-group thing? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
I think, do I think it makes a difference? I don't think it makes too much of a difference, to be frank, Callum, because I don't think that most people are really aware of those dynamics. You know, we're talking about like social dynamics here that affect like a relatively small number of people. Of course, there are always like officers, and of course they always have friends, but you know, it's usually more than one, you know, different group of people. So for example, not everyone on council, not everyone on board is a close personal friend of mine. And that's, you know, certainly has not been the case for the sort of 5+ years I've been involved in the union.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
I mean, I think it's sort of just natural to expect that like people with similar interests will coalesce. So,
yeah.
I mean, that is what happens around like, you know, things like this.
Yeah. As maybe a symbol of a counterculture that has developed.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I call you Anon? How would you respond to what Abs has said?
To be honest, I think I would mostly agree with him. I mean, I've never particularly been inclined to engage with the union, but that's never because I thought that there was some slightly off-putting inside a cult. It's just not really what interests me as a person, and I feel like that's a view that quite a lot of students share. So I think I'd agree with him that while there may be that insider ring of people who are really in the know and enjoy the nitty-gritty, as you would say, I don't think that's what prohibits people from engaging with the union.
Yeah, what do people think about the Student Activities Committee? I was quite excited by that. Isabel, what do you think? Isabel?
To be honest, I don't know what that is. What is it?
Well, just the idea of bringing students into planning of activities.
Can you hear me?
We appear to be having.
It's a bit patchy.
We appear to be having connection problems.
Would you like me to address that?
Yeah, why don't
do
you?
you want to ask a different? Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a really exciting idea. I think like student ents, giving students some control over ents in the union. It's been on other manifestos in the past. I believe it was on Sam's manifesto. I believe it was on TFD's manifesto last year.
Yeah.
But obviously, like, there's not been much cause for sort of democratic, discursive planning over student events because there have not been very many because of COVID.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason that I'm so excited, you know, we saw the success. Well, hope, you know, very good progress, let's say, instead of the summer ball committee.
Well, exactly. So it's about sort of generalizing that idea, and I think that's something that Fifi wanted to do, like, sincerely, and would have had we had more time.
Fifi, of course, being the DPFS from last year. You know, Anon, would that have provided a route for you, do you think? Had students had an opportunity to get themselves involved in the planning of events, would that provide an avenue for people to become more engaged with the union?
I mean, for me personally, no, but I definitely think that there would not be any harm in trying to open up an avenue. I'm sure that there would be characters who it would appeal to, and I I don't see how it would have a negative impact to have that sort of interaction.
Yeah. Let's turn then to our other candidate. It was a publicity stunt to drive traffic to another role that they are looking to take. Do you think this undermines their the basis and the legitimacy of that other campaign?
Is that a question to me or to Izzy?
Isabel, do you want to take this?
I don't think so. I think we see joke candidates all the time in national elections, and I think it's like expected to see them in a university election. So I think people are still going to vote for the serious candidates. If I'm not wrong, I don't actually know of any joke candidate that has won in the past, so I might be wrong. But it seems like it doesn't really affect the way the elections are run for serious candidates.
Yeah, it's a good point. Abs, obviously this is your second term, and you have to step down. You can't run again.
I wouldn't even if I could, Callum.
You wouldn't even if you could. We'll lose our glorious leader. Does Lloyd not represent very much a continuity candidate?
I think he does and he doesn't. So his being involved in the union in the past and us, being friends with each other doesn't mean that we think all the same things.
No, this is less to do with your personal relationship, more
Sure.
to do with the fact that your policies do not seem, he is not criticizing you and
sure
and coming out ready to destroy your legacy.
I think what I would say to that is sort of twofold, right? The first thing is that I ran on principle, and I think the reason that on like certain principles rather than primarily on specific policies. And I think the reason that I was successful as a candidate was that those were principles that I think a lot of students could get behind. So, for example, it's very difficult to disagree with the idea that students should have more say over the decisions that are made in the university. I wouldn't expect any candidate to disagree with that. And I think that's basically a popular and sensible idea. I think, basically it's just something that other candidates historically have failed to talk about and haven't sort of thought about how to sort of exercise leverage to get that. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is that we have been through crisis. We've actually been through two major crises. The first to do with the running of the union internally, and the second being COVID, right? You're
referring to the bullying cases.
No, I'm not. I'm referring to sort of deficiencies in our operations before 2019. I'm referring to health and safety problems. I'm referring to sort of like broad issues in the support staff structure. If we got into specifics, I think the DPFS debate wouldn't have time to go ahead. But like, in dealing with those crises, there are a limited number of different things one can do. So, you can judge a candidate based on how competently you might feel they'll address those challenges. But, there are relatively few choices one can make. So, for example, like when we're talking about what we can do with the bar right now, or as we get out of, these restrictions, we can only do a few different things, right? Because of the restrictions that will still be there around masking and distancing and stuff.
That's a very easy thing to say, the technocrat, I am the technocratic pragmatist.
I don't think I am, but
don't worry. I'll make sure you have your bread and circuses. Anon, does this sound like guff to you?
Not. That's quite I think what we call a loaded question, isn't it? You're enhancing your journalistic instincts, Callum. I don't think it is guff. To be honest, I think that would be a bit unfair on Abjay. But there is, of course, always the difference between saying that you'll do something and then actually do it, and that's not in any way a criticism of Abjay and his track record, but it's just always something to be wary of, I think, in any political debate.
let's talk about the union. And Isabel was very good in that she brought up the question, of course, of dealing with the college that has doubled down on supporting a bully and someone who has been found guilty of gross misconduct and driving away employees and then getting them to banning them from then speaking. Lloyd offered a very pragmatic answer. He said, we must engage, you can't shut them off entirely, that relations must be maintained. That, that's all well and good, but does that not tarnish the union by, through sort of contact? Isabel, what would you say to that?
I think that I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, I would like to hear what other people have to say first.
Okay, Anon, are you pro, complete non-compliance and refusing to engage until demands are met?
I don't think that would be the best way to go about things. I mean, obviously, what's happened at the top level with the bullying is abhorrent, but I think at the same time, it would be very damaging for a lot of the student body as well if we were to adopt a completely, unilateral cutting of ties. And especially after the year that we've just had, I don't think it would perhaps be the best policy. I also don't know if it entirely invalidates the union to interact. I don't think that one can just say that the interaction between the union and the college is then as a logical consequence and an endorsement of what they've done. I think there is a separation of that, and that most people will acknowledge that because the unions made it very clear that they're against what's happened with the bullying in the upper levels of the college. And also there's members of the college who are on the side of the union, maybe a bit lower down, but there's I know even some of my own professors are very against what's happened. So it's not a single monolith institution. There's a lot of individuals in there who have, well, definitely more nuanced viewpoints than good or bad. That would be my thoughts on the matter.
And Abs, I'm sure you will want to comment on this as well, but I will just add into the mixing bowl the idea. But if we can't stand up on this, does that not make the union fundamentally a weak institution? If there is no way, where are our lines in the sand, beyond which we will not budge?
I think I would kind of just question the premise slightly, because I think we have been quite strong on this issue. And I think we've been much stronger on this issue than the union might have been, 3 or 4 years ago. I think, most of the, so you talk about engagement, disengagement, right? Most of the discussion that has happened internally, in fact, the only discussion of this matter that has happened at the college's most senior committee has happened at our behest, basically. It has not been brought by another member of council. In addition, I think, Anon summed up some of the points quite well. I would just say that even at a relatively senior level, most of the staff members, the vast majority of staff members, were not complicit in the bad things that have happened over the last couple of years. And, working with them and usually, often, in fact, arguing with them, disagreeing with them, but doing it sort of constructively is the main way that we can improve the experience that students get at this university. And at the end of the day, that is our job.
Yeah, it's a well put, I'll say. Thank you to you three. It's very, very good of you to share your views. I think we are going to move on now to our final role, the DPFS role. Thank you all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final discussion on the union elections. And today we are going to host two candidates for the role of the Deputy President for Finance and Services, and they are Tin Lo and Sam Lee. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Ahmed.
Nice to meet you. So the way this is going to be very simple. You're going to have 30 seconds to give yourself a brief introduction and what your aims are for your role next year, and we're going to pass it on between the two of you. So, Sam, would you like to begin, please?
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm your Deputy President of Finance and Services. This year, I've worked hard to fix issues of the long-standing issues within the college, within the union, as well as within the DPFS role. But there's still more to do. We need to overhaul our systems infrastructure to ensure fast response times and more efficient financial processes. We need to lobby college to expand their student support services to White City. White City, and we also need to revise our funding model for venues to ensure we have a financially sustainable funding model and a financial and ethical staffing model.
And that's it. Thank you very much, Sam. And over to you, Tin. 30 seconds. Begin, please.
So hey guys, I'm Tin. I'm going for DPFS role. So since for these 3 days, I've been talking to people on White City campus, different treasurers from CSPs and constituent unions, and we talk about different stuff about sustainability and welfare. So my point is to transform and listen to people, and I think the union overall should improve its communication, effectiveness, and transparency. And I think students should have a say on the things that should matter, and for the skills I've learned from my community role in the finance and investment society would help.
Thank you very much. That's 30 seconds up for you. So the way I will do it, I'm going to ask both of you a question, and both of you will be responding to the points that you're going to make. And we're going to go starting with Sam. So my first question for you, Sam, is how do you think you've been doing this year, given the pandemic and everything that's happened?
So I think it's, the pandemic has caused, it's been quite difficult to work through. I think for two reasons. I think it's just not normal for the union for obvious reasons. I think it's meant that we've had to find new approaches to the way that we handle CSP activity, to the way that we handle our processes. But also, I think the hardest part for me this year is, working from home. You miss a lot by not sort of being in the office with staff and being able to just turn around to sort of Ross and say, well, I've got this thing. So it means that, trying to get to a conclusion can take a lot longer because you have to jump through more hoops to achieve it. But I think, I think I've done a very good job this year because, we've already started to hammer out and to fix issues that have been long standing in this organization. And, that to be honest have been left dormant just because it's been easy to leave it that way, and people are now challenging. I am now challenging, as well as the other officer trustees are challenging it, saying just because that's the way we did it doesn't mean that's the best way. This is quite new, and I think it's quite good for us, and it's meant that we've been able to approach it differently.
Very good. So we know that you're obviously holding the role right now, and we actually had a look at your manifesto from last year, which was quite hard to obtain. And one of the points that you've mentioned here was, as you said, was one of your manifesto points, which we found was that you wanted to speed up student claims procedure, and also for societies as well, and other financial processes. Now we've discussed with two societies, the Investment Society and the IQ Plus Society, and they've said that the sponsorship contract has taken them more than 6 months in order to get anything done, and in some cases even it hasn't even been successful. And how do you respond to that claim about how you've mentioned that you were going to try and work on that over the past year, and you haven't been able to achieve it as of yet? And now that you're running, of course, again for your position, and you're trying to, as you said, hammer out some of these issues.
So, I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and that has meant that obviously we've had to delay some discussions on certain points. We've had a major turnover in our senior staff as an organisation, and that's meant that we've had to reprioritise the work that we've been doing this year. And so, actually fixing you come into this role and you have all of these plans and you run for a manifesto thinking, oh, I can do this, X, Y, and Z. It's going to be easy. I know what the problems are. But you come into the role and you realize that there are hurdles and hoops you have to jump through to get this done. And actually that there are other reasons why these things are not doable at the moment. Now, we've overcome that at the moment. We've fixed some of the back of house things that we could do because of sort of with the way that we pay claims. So there have been changes to the way that claims have been paid. We've changed how we've approached that as a staff team. But obviously the front of house stuff requires, some significant change on our systems side. And that's a lot more difficult given what we had to get through for the beginning of the year and implementing special procedures to be able to do things. But we have already started these, and whilst you may not see it yet, these things have been done. And when we talk about the sponsorship procedure, I'm the first person to really make any significant change. I've passed a paper at our finance and risk subcommittee of our board of trustees to approve other members of staff to sign off sponsorship contracts. And that means that over the Easter period, that is being handed over. That has already been, time has been scheduled in to hand that over. And so come third term, we will see an actual change in how sponsorship contracts have been done. And so although you may not see it now, these processes have been done. They just take time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I think we've got the right idea. And obviously, Sam has just mentioned about hoops and hurdles. And when we looked at when we did our research on you, we found that you've been a committee member of the Finance and Investment Society. And the only thing that we want to ask you is obviously that Sam's mentioned about hoops and hurdles, and you haven't really had a huge amount of experience actually working with things such as the role that Sam's doing with the financial stuff, with clubs and societies and handling their sponsorship stuff. So how are you going to be able to avoid running into the issues that obviously Sam has been doing and making sure you're going to deliver the best experience for the clubs and societies that are at Imperial?
Yeah, so as being a committee member of investment society, so I understand because of COVID and everything is not under control. But I think the phase is like things could be a bit more. It's like more like the union system that has to be changed, because like the claiming system is slow and then the activities aren't very user friendly. So that's why I think we have to change this bit. Or for example, having student staff to do with claims that are less like significant amount of money to dealing with the claims via some student staff. So the DPFS itself wouldn't have to do all the stuff on his or her own. So based on my experiences, I was dealing with the finance. So I was organizing a fundamentals of finance course. So me and another committee member are in charge of this, where I have to be dealing with all the logistics stuff, for example, finding speakers and then dealing with the dealing with the money issues, for example, paying them to deliver a lecture. And then I was talked to one of the speakers like last week, and then since the course happened for more than a month, and then we still haven't really, as I understand how this process of claiming is a bit slow. So after 2 weeks, the speaker told us that, okay, I'm going to teach it for free. I'm not asking to get the claims.
So the good question that we have that we want to ask you is, what do you understand about the role of a DPFS? Because obviously you've mentioned all the stuff that you've done, but what do you actually know that the role entails, and how are you going to make sure you deliver the best parts of that role? So mainly, what do you know about it?
So with the DPFS, there are two main aspects. So besides of dealing with finances, so for example, dealing with claims, sponsorship processing, and also with the development and training for so that's a bit of collaboration with the role where the DPFS has to be is like, for example, educating people, for example, the newly elected like cultural societies and also the constituent unions and all the voluntary staff. So they have to have a training, for example, just not going through the activities quizzes. So like, for example, when I was doing the role as the head of careers and stuff, so I only got 2 quizzes, and then I have to just like memorize the answers and copying down the answers and like that. So I think that's not very helpful indeed. So and I think that have to be changed is at least having some training and support where the DPRS could do. So at least, for example, knowing how to file a claim form, how to write a sponsorship proposal, or this kind of support.
Okay, so with that in mind, so the final question we're going to ask both of you to answer is, both of you have claimed in your manifestos that you want some kind of union presence in the White City area, and we want to ask, what do you think is needed, and how can you find the money to do this, given, of course, the union is facing a lot of cuts in the minute, and obviously the financials of it are not as good as it used to be before the pandemic. So we want to ask you, what do you think is needed, and where you can find the money? And to that, we'll go for Sam first.
So, in terms of finances for buildings out in White City, it would be college funded. They are aware that we need space out there, and they are aware that as they push more students and more courses out to White City, they have to be able to give them the relevant support. And so, we were not involved at an early enough time in these discussions a few years back, but we should be involved now as they look to expand the second half of the White City campus, and those plans are drawn up. We should be involved in those discussions, and we should be edging in and saying, well, this is what we want. We need spaces for students to sit down. We need spaces for students to have fun and to build communities. We need a space for our staff to be out there. If as we look for more and more students to be out there, we need a presence out there. Otherwise, kind of what is the point of a students' union if they're not there to represent and support the students who need a relevant access?
Yeah, thank you. And last words from you, Tin, before we go and wrap up the conversation.
So I think, as adding up to what Sam has said, I think the union press is at least having a union store, it's a union office based on White City campus, where we have the union staff, or at least the DPFs could maybe sit on the union counter where to have an office, because mentioned about the ICU in Whitehall. So it's when there's a remodeling process going to happen, then we might have to reallocate people, like the union staff. So I think besides of having student spaces, I think there's just one way to improve is the food quality. So I was talking to one of my friends, a chemistry student, and then he told me about that. So except that cafes were serving hot and cold food, but there aren't any facilities nearby, like a restaurant. So I would say the nearest one would be in Westfield. So even now I'm based in Hammersmith Hospital, so there aren't many food options for them. So I think this has to be definitely improved, increase the diversity of food and improve the food quality.
And on that note, we'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for joining the conversation, and we wish you all the best with your campaigning. And if you want, and for anyone watching, if you want to vote for any of the positions you've seen today, go on the union website at union.ic.ac.uk, where you'll find all the relevant information. And on that note, we'd like to bring in some of our panelists to discuss the candidates that we've just been listening to, please. And Callum, Petrara, and Yasmin, hello.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, an interesting conversation. I think Tin actually rather distinguished himself. You try to put him on the spot and suggest that just because you're in finance society doesn't mean you know what DPFS is. Yeah. But actually, he actually showed himself to be quite competent in that respect. So I think that was respect to him.
Indeed.
Petrara, I'd be interested. Sam, it's a difficult claim to respond to. That the work has done and it's all coming. It's just over it's just over on the other side of the hill. Just hold on a little bit longer. Do you think that's a credible thing? Is that what we is that what we just have to accept from our sabbatical officers?
Well, I do think that obviously with COVID, everything's taking a bit longer to come through. I think so I've worked with Sam so far for Services and Sustainability Board, and I've seen that he is quite on top of things. So I do think that, I can take his word on just keeping it out for a bit longer. Yeah, okay. And, both candidates were talking about White City. Ahmed, you're a chemist.
Yep.
And have spent time out there.
Yep.
Do you see, is there a space for it? Do you see that the union developing a location out there?
I think it would be quite hard. I think as far as I'm aware, the price and the money, the finance you'd require for that would be quite high, and I don't think the union has the budget for that at the minute.
Right,
Especially with,
sure. But let's sorry. Let me rephrase the question.
Yeah.
What do you think the impact on the sort of student culture would be if there were, say, a bar out there? We already see with Reynolds, medics staying really quite separate from the rest of the student body. Do you think we might see a similar thing occur with chemists?
I think it should be done. I think it's a good idea with chemists as well, because obviously it's quite isolated from the main campus. But I think it would definitely improve the student experience, especially because a lot of chemists work there for their final year project as well, and maybe even postgraduates as well, who actually spend a lot of their time there. Whether, again, as I've mentioned, whether that's actually feasible is a different matter entirely. But yeah. I like the proposition that was made, but whether we can pull it off is a different discussion.
Yasmin, Tin in his manifesto had a line about expanding the size of dining areas. What do you think that means? Do you think he explained it at all? Do you think we got any clarity on that point?
I don't think he really explained it a lot, but from his manifesto, I can see that he has a passion of catering to international students' needs and expanding the different options in the food. So I think it's quite good, but then I would appreciate if he can mention a bit more, since there isn't really much space left. So where is he actually expecting to open more stalls or provide more food options?
Yeah, I mean, as a follow-up to that, do you think that we're talking about the union food here, not college food. Do you think that the union has a problem that it's not catering to international students? Do you think, is that an important thing that the union should be doing? Should menus be culturally sensitive?
In my opinion, it doesn't really matter that much to me. I think currently the food options is quite extensive already, and I think the most important is to cater to dietary needs and instead of cultural needs. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Bachara, you are obviously very, very keen on sustainability. Do you think we didn't really hear anything from either of them on the point of sustainability? What would you have liked to have heard more about? Where do you think a DPFS can really make a difference?
Well, with both of them, neither of the manifestos really mentioned the Services and Sustainability Board. And when you asked Tin about what the role of DPFS is, there's, again, no mention of SSB. And their role would be to chair those meetings. And I feel a lot of the sustainability-focused societies have been very underrepresented in the past. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the time as students, we can feel like Imperial especially prioritizes finance over students' opinions. Like, we've all been pretty upset at GAS being on the board of Chevron for ages, and that was even before the bullying scandal. So yeah. I feel like I would like to see a candidate representing both the finance side and students' opinions a bit better. And I'd especially like to see how Tim could do so with his finance background and hear a bit more about how he feels like he could represent us as well.
Yeah, that's well. Should we throw it open to questions from the audience? Are there any comments? Ahmed. Right, we'll ignore that. Ahmed, you picked up on the fact that time after time the same points are getting made. What does that say to you? What does that say? Is that whose fault is that?
I think what's happened in the union has been that a lot of people who claim to be able to make changes have actually inherited a very broken structure. So the underlying structure of the union has actually gone started becoming quite rotten, and it's actually.
And can I clarify? So you're saying it's a structural problem, not a lack of student engagement?
Yeah, I think it's a structural problem, and the fact that you have people coming in saying, "I will do this, I will do that," and then they kind of realize that it's a lot bigger of a problem than they anticipated, and that's why I think changes are quite hard to see. But I think it's quite encouraged by the fact that we're actually starting to, under the union is starting to overhaul its structure and actually trying to deliver the changes that.
Well, yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree that the changes in staffing are promising. Yasmin, would you agree with that? Which candidate, to you seemed more credible?
First of all, I think when Ahmed asked Sam about how he wasn't really able to deliver some of his promises from his last election, I think it just gave me an impression that he's just trying to. It's like he's trying to get away with not being able to deliver his promises just because of COVID, and I don't think it's really a great image to present. But whereas Tin, he doesn't really, although he doesn't seem to have as much experience as Sam, you don't really expect people to come into this role fully prepared. So I think it's quite refreshing to see someone with some new ideas to come in.
So okay, so you would be pro a bit of turnover, a bit of new soil. I can't remember the expression.
Yeah.
Pachara, do you think that the union prioritizes sustainability? We've got there was the launch of the SRI. Which was driven by was led by union forces, is union members, employees. Do you think what more should be done?
So with SRI, it's interesting you mentioned that, because they did try to ask for students' opinions, but it wasn't actually really advertised anywhere. There was a page asking, we want to hear back on your feet. We want to hear from our students. What is your opinion on socially responsible investment program? I think is what the acronym stands for. But again, there were not really any emails, not really advertising for it. So it kind of feels a bit like a front of greenwashing, or just kind of like a front of pretending to do things when they don't actually have any heart behind it. It's kind of what I felt about it.
Sure. Can we not forget, there's a question from Shervin, can we not forget that we're 6.5 months into manifestos that are here for a 12-month period? It's not all going to be achieved by now. How would you respond to that, Ahmed? Do you think that's do you think that's a fair point?
I think you have to consider as well is that for some of especially for finance, especially for some of the roles, a lot of the union services are closed right now. So, for example, the bars are closed, and the clubs and societies are all remote. So I don't think their workload is as much as it used to be. So I don't see how they couldn't have be able to work through all of their manifestos by now. Of course, I understand like what Shervin is saying, that of course manifestos run over a 12-month cycle, but because we've all been studying remote and because everything's been done remotely, there's a lot fewer tasks that they have to do compared to previously. That's my only argument against what he's said. But other than that, I do see what he's trying to say.
Okay. In that case, I think we will wrap up there. Thank you to you three for joining us. Very, very interesting. Thank you to all the candidates for attending. I appreciate it's not an easy thing to come up and be criticised on online, but it's very brave of you and good of you to recognise the importance of it. With that, I hope that anyone watching has found this helpful. And we will, here at Felix, try to keep up the production of interesting content. Let's roll the outro.
We here at Felix hope that you found the last couple of hours helpful in deciding who to vote for. As always, we are very interested in what you think and would like to allow you to have your say So write an email to us at felix@ic.ac.uk or contact us on social media at Felix_Imperial. As I mentioned earlier, voting is now open and it's very easy to do online. Just go on any major internet browser, search Imperial Union Leadership Elections, and it'll be the top link. Voting does close at 2 o'clock on Thursday, so I encourage you to vote now or as soon as possible to avoid the disappointment of not having your voice heard. The results will then be announced on Friday the 19th of March. Until then, that's all from us here at Felix. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.